Okay, Anne, if you're ready, why don't you, we'll come to order, and Anne, why don't you call roll, please?
Okay, thanks very much. All right, if you would please announce your name when I announce your jurisdiction. County of San Mateo.
Dave Pine.
County of San Mateo. Town of Atherton.
Rick DeGolia.
City of Belmont.
Julia Mates.
City of Brisbane. City of Burlingame.
Donna Colson.
Town of Colma. City of Daly City.
Rodos Magwal.
City of East Palo Alto. City of Foster City. City of Half Moon Bay.
Harvey Ryback.
Town of Hillsborough.
Larry May.
City of Los Banos. City of Menlo Park.
Betsy Nash.
City of Millbrae.
Ann Schneider.
City of Pacifica.
Mary Bear.
Big Stick.
Oh, I'm sorry. So Mary, you're here, but
I am.
Okay.
I am. Thank you.
And then we have a new member, I think, who will be sworn in. Town
Correct.
of Portola Valley.
Jeff Alfs?
City of Redwood City.
Giselle Hale.
City of San Bruno.
Marty Medina.
City of San Carlos.
Laura Palmer Lohan.
City of San Mateo.
Rick Bonilla.
City of South San Francisco.
Flora Nicholas.
Town of Woodside. All right. And
Jen Wall.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep, Jen Wall.
Jen Wall. Okay. And Director Emeritus.
Pradeep Gupta.
And Director Emeritus.
John Keener.
Okay, we do have a quorum.
How many do we have? I lost count.
We have at least 17.
Oh, okay. Okay, it's more than I realized. Okay, great. Thank you. And Council, do you want to do the swearing-ins now, or should I take public comment first?
You know, I'll go ahead and swear folks in now, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
So just to be sure, and Anne, this question is to you, I guess, although I could also ask Councilwoman Nash. Has Councilwoman Nash been sworn in before?
Yes, I have.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so then I think that I am just swearing in Councilman Big Stick, Councilwoman Wall, and then I don't know, has Mayor I don't know if it's Faria or Faria, has he arrived yet? Well, you know, maybe we should take public comment first and see whether he arrives, so I don't swear folks in twice.
I could do that. Is there any, are there any comments from the public on items not on tonight's agenda? If you do want to comment, please raise your hand in the Ring Central application. I cannot see all of your camera feeds. Okay, I do not see any hands raised. Actually, I do see, Harvey, are you raising your hand?
No, sorry.
Oh, okay, you're adjusting a camera, sorry.
Yeah.
I did happen to see that. Okay, I see no hands raised, so sorry, David, we've bought you as much time as we can.
That did not buy me much time at all, but you know what, we could also,
did.
you know, we could, do we, you know what,
I juggle also, does that help? Yeah.
It could.
Your report.
All right. Yeah, I was going to say we could approve the agenda and the consent agenda and do the chair report and stuff if there's enough people. I guess if there's 17, we could do that.
I think,
But
I think it makes sense, David, to do that. Why not give yourself a little bit more time in case the other member shows up?
all right, perfect. Then let's do that.
That sounds fine. In that case, I will take an action to set the agenda and approve the consent agenda items.
Making a motion to approve the agenda, consented.
Second.
Okay, moved by Rick Bonilla, seconded by Julia Mates. And roll call vote, please.
Okay, if you would, please announce your approval or disapproval when I announce your jurisdiction. County of San Mateo.
Yes.
County of San Mateo. Town of Atherton.
Yes.
City of Belmont.
Aye.
City of Brisbane.
Aye.
City of Burlingame.
Yes.
Town of Colma. City of Daly City.
Yes.
City of East Palo Alto. City of Foster City. City of Half Moon Bay.
Yes.
Town of Hillsborough.
Yes.
City of Los Banos. City of Menlo Park.
Yes.
City of Millbrae.
Yes.
City of Pacifica.
Yes.
Town of Portola Valley.
Yes.
City of Redwood City.
Yes.
City of San Bruno. City of San Carlos.
Yes.
City of San Mateo.
Yes.
City of South San Francisco.
Yes.
Town of Woodside. And the motion passes.
Yes.
Oh,
To the extent I can vote, yes.
It's academic. Don't worry about it.
Got it.
okay, the motion passes. And also, David, we have a, Jen Wolosen, the alternate for Menlo Park, that might also be sworn in this evening.
Fantastic. Yeah, we'll just, as soon as we get done with the reports, we'll hopefully the representative from Los Banos will be here. Otherwise, we'll just go ahead and do the swearing against them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to my report. I have one item. First of all, I apologize. I was supposed to send a message around asking if there was interest in the executive committee. We have currently 2 openings on the executive committee, as Catherine Mahanpour and Kat Carlton have left their offices. So Dave Pine has graciously agreed to be our nominating chair for the executive committee positions. So I will, because we don't have anyone lined up yet, I will ask you to, you can email either, well, you can contact either me or Dave. Actually, why don't you try to contact both of us if you're interested or want to discuss serving on the executive committee. There are 9 of us, or there are 9 positions. Currently we meet on the first Monday of every month at 8 a.m. Again, if you're interested, you can ask me questions and put your name in, and we will hopefully nominate and approve 2 new members of the executive committee in January. Thanks. That's all I have. So that brings us to the, yes.
Jeff, if I may add, I think we also need a couple of folks to assist me in the process of making nominations for the executive committee, the president and the vice president.
Okay, that's a good idea. Yes.
And
can I
don't know if you want to get any volunteers right now, or
I will ask for volunteers now. And you can volunteer later, but if there's anyone who wants to volunteer now to assist Dave, maybe 2 other people we could use to be a nominating committee, that would be helpful.
This is Larry May. I'll be glad to.
Okay, thank you, Larry.
I would also be willing to help. Rick Bonilla.
Okay, then I will leave it to the 3 of you. And again, anyone who's interested in the executive committee can contact me and Dave, and we'll be happy to talk about it, and you can put your name in officially. That is all I have at the moment, so thank you. And we'll move on to the CEO report with Jan. I love that song, but it's probably better to mute yourself just for the reports. Thanks.
I have music in the background. Not my music. Okay, I think maybe someone else arrived. Is Tom here from Los Banos? You raise your hand? Yeah, okay. So David, I don't know if you want to do the swearing in now.
Sure, I'm happy to. So I am going to go ahead and swear in, I think it's Mayor. Is it Faria or Faria? Anyway, sorry about that if I mispronounced it. And then Councilman Big Stick, Councilwoman Wall, and then I believe there was an alternate as well. So what I'm going to do, if you would go ahead and raise your left hand, each of you, and then when I say I, you also say I, and then state your name, and then after that, if you would repeat after me. So I, and state your name, please.
Jen Wallison.
Jennifer Wall.
And then do we have Mr. Faria and Big Stick as well?
Hi, Tiger Jazz Big Stick.
Yep. All right,
There
well,
we go.
I'll
There
keep
we
on.
go. Now I, Tom Faria, I had to get my microphone working.
There we go.
Fantastic. Sorry, this is even harder over Zoom. Who would have thought that possible? Okay, so do solemnly swear
Do solemnly
swear
Solemnly
that
swear.
I will that I will support and defend
that I
That
will
I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
The Constitution
the
of
Constitution
the United
of the
States
United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the
and
Constitution
the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I
I will
will
bear
bear
true
faith
I will
and
bear
allegiance
true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and to the
and the
Constitution of the State
Constitution
of
of the
California,
State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this
and I take
obligation
this
freely
obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that
I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
charge the duties upon which I'm
charge
about
the
to
duties
enter.
that I'm about to enter.
Congratulations
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
and welcome to the board.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. I don't know how anyone does barbershop quartet over Zoom. Welcome, and I guess we'll just move on to our CEO report. Jan, go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good to see everyone tonight. We have a lot of people here tonight. If we can go to the next slide, please. What I'll be covering tonight is welcome to our new board members and letting you know some of the things coming up. Our COVID-19 load impact analysis, an update on the PCIA, update on our Power on Peninsula program, update on the REACH codes, and then our upcoming meetings. So if we can come to our next slide, please. Welcome to our new board members who just got sworn in. We're happy to have you here and look forward to your active participation at PCE. So congratulations, and congratulations on your elections as well. Next slide, please. So Ann Bartoletti, who you met tonight, who called the roll, she will be in touch with you. She's our board clerk, and you'll be hearing from her a lot. She will be setting up times for you and I to have a call together to just kind of update you on what's going on. And then we will also be scheduling training sessions for new board members and alternates early in the spring. So keep an eye tuned for that. The next slide, please. And I just wanted to remind board members and inform the new board members that we, as staff, initiate meetings of subsets of interested board members in particular areas. So if you're interested in a particular area, please let Ann know. So one of the areas is legislative. We have a legislative subcommittee. Our plan is to have this group meet in January, March, July, and October. The first meeting in January will be to review PCE's legislative platform with the plan to bring that platform to the board for approval in February. And then we will also be setting up meet and greets with all of our local electeds from the legislature in January. So if you're interested in that, please let Ann know. And Joe Weedman pretty much leads the legislative subcommittee. We have a marketing subcommittee, which KJ Janowski leads. She will be getting that group together within the first quarter to discuss how we're going to be messaging on some of our key initiatives. The next group is our power procurement group. This is group meets when needed, and we will be getting this group together fairly soon as we review the top proposals that we've received from our renewables RFO. So we like to be able to review those and get into depth on some of those projects with members of the board who are interested. The next one is our resiliency and distributed energy subcommittee, which is a little bit dormant right now, but we will have that group meet as needed. We have a strategic plan committee. That group was fairly active this last calendar year as we put together our strategic plan. We will probably have this group meet with us again before our board retreat in September, just to show you kind of where we're at on meeting the objectives of the strategic plan. We have a succession planning group that we met with in November, and basically this is to look at best practices for the role of board members and alternates to make sure we can get you as engaged and as active as we can, and also to talk about the orientation program for new board members, alternates, and our Citizens Advisory Committee members. And then we will probably be lining up a workforce policy group. We are planning to update our policies on workforce, sustainable workforce policy, our ethical vendors policy, and other items related to internal workforce policies from the strategic plan. So we will be getting this group together in the next couple of months. So please let us know if you're interested. And if you're already on one of those, if you've been meeting on one of those subcommittees, to let us know if you're still planning to continue that. Okay, so if we can go to the next slide, please. As we've been doing for the last few months, we'll look at what the load impact has been from COVID-19. So let's go to the next slide, please. So we're comparing April to November of 2020 compared to April to November of 2019. And there's been a total decrease of 5% in our load over that same time period. About a 13% decrease in our C&I, our commercial industrial load, and about a 10% increase in residential load. But I think we've been seeing month over month that the overall decrease has been less over time as more energy is being used. And also there were some extreme heat events where a lot of power was used in August and October. If we go to the next slide, please. It shows the monthly load comparisons. So if we look at all of the months, you know, from in the very beginning, starting in April, our 2020 load was definitely a lot lower than the 2019 load. But as you look farther out, like October, it's pretty much the same. In fact, this October, our load was about 1,000 kilowatt hours more than it was in 2019. And for November, again, we're tracking a little bit lower. October may have been like that because it was so hot for a few days, and our load was higher than we expected. Next slide, please. If we look at the changes by customer class, we can see how certain areas of the economy seem to be picking up. So like small commercial back in May, April and May had dropped significantly. It was down 22% compared to the month, that same month in 2019. But now small commercial is down 13% compared to the same month in 2019. So it seems to be recovering a little bit. The big increase that we saw in residential, which is the second line, is not as much now. We're up about 9% on residential. For medium commercial, again, the biggest drop was in April. It was down 19%, and now we're down about 12%. Similarly with large commercial. And then for industrial, it was down 22% in April, and now we see that industrial is up, actually higher than it was last year. So hopefully that's because all of those biotech companies in South San Francisco are churning out drugs that will help us all get back to normal soon. Next slide, please. And if we look at our load shapes, the blue is 2019, the orange is 2020. So this shows August through November for commercial and industrial loads. And we can see that the delta between 2019 and 2020 is decreasing over time. We go to the next slide, which is our residential. We can see that our residential load, which is the orange line, is still trending higher than 2019. And the shape of it, you know, the dip that we have had in the past during the afternoon is starting to come back a little bit in November. So people are probably going back to work, but since we're all in lockdown, that's probably going to change again for December. And if we go to the next slide, our overall PCE load, we can see that we're getting closer to our overall load that we had in 2019, and we can note that October, the 2020 load was marginally higher than the 2019 load. We go to the next slide, please. So today was the big day that the PUC made a decision on the ERA forecast and the PCIA trigger. This is to look at what our rates going to be for 2021 and how is the PCIA going to be handled. And we've talked to you about this a lot. So as you know, there's this PUBA balance, which is, I don't know what the acronym stands for, but it's actually the under collections in terms of how much our customers have not paid towards the PCIA and was under collected and therefore needs to be paid back in order to make the bundled customers whole. It's a large number, and working with CalCCA, the decision today was to go ahead and amortize this over 36 months for the next 3 years, 21, 22, and 23. So that will help kind of ease the pain of that large under collection that our customers need to pay. There will be no PCIA cap for 2021. As you might remember, the PCIA was capped at ½ cent per year, so that cap will not apply for 2021. And because there will not be a cap, the 2021 PCIA, in addition to this PUBA collection, will likely be higher than the ½ cent, but there will be no under collection because the PCIA should be fully recovered during the year. So our hope is that this will result in less volatility in the PCIA, and that someday this will go down. Certainly we expect it to go down in 2024 and 2025 when Diablo Canyon comes offline. So this is pretty much close to the settlement that we talked about last month that CalCCA had worked out with PG&E. The PUC rejected the settlement, but what they did adopt is pretty close to what that settlement agreement was. So we're going to run the numbers. This decision just came out today. We know that the ERA forecasts in terms of what PG&E's rates are going to be will need to be looked at very carefully, and we will bring this to the executive committee and to the board in January as to what our recommendation is on how we adjust our rates. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So our Power on Peninsula medical program, this is where we're providing portable backup batteries for free to our customers who are in high fire threat districts that were affected by previous public safety power shutoffs, that are low-income care and FARA customers or medical baseline customers. And we've been working with Hassett Hardware in Half Moon Bay, and we've delivered 150, Hassett has 150 batteries, and we've qualified 118 customers to receive 128 of those batteries. And then we have the portable solar panels that people can use to recharge the batteries, and we've distributed 29 of those. So all of the eligible customers have received their batteries, and you know, as we find more, then we will still have some more batteries to get out to those customers. Next. We wanted to update you on the REACH codes. So we have 9 jurisdictions in San Mateo County at this time have adopted REACH codes, and we have 4 jurisdictions that are scheduling study sessions with their councils in the first quarter. So we're excited to see that. And Portola Valley, it looks like you're going to have your first reading fairly soon. So hopefully by this time next year, we'll see this number double. And then the last slide is just our meetings. So the executive committee will be meeting on January 11th, the second Monday of the month. The Citizens Advisory Committee meets the second Thursday of the month, and the Board of Directors will be meeting on the 4th Thursday of the month. So we will see you next year at those meetings. So happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Thank you, Jan. And again, if you have questions, it's a lot easier if you raise your hand in the software. Like I just can't see everyone's face at once. Questions on Jan's report? Okay, I do not see any. In that case, we can move on to item 3, which is the CAC report. Desiree?
Hi, everyone. So we had our meeting on usual schedule 2 weeks ago. And really, we started off the meeting by a proposal that was brought to us from our transportation working group, which is headed by Janelle London. And it's about the Beyond Gasoline initiative. And the committee voted and decided to endorse a recommendation to the board to adopt this. So we'll come to this later under item number 9 and provide additional information then. And we also had an update on the EV municipal fleet program, and then discussed a little bit about how to make sure that our working groups stay in compliance with the Brown Act, and we'll continue that discussion as we rearrange our working groups in the new year to fit better in line with what staff is working on. So that's really it. We actually had a pretty short meeting, but I think everyone went away happy with what we've done over this year, as challenging as it's been, and really celebrated a lot of our achievements in the committee. So I can take any questions if there are any.
Thanks, Desiree. And yes, thanks to you and the CAC for the work you guys have done. I think you guys have actually really kind of found some great ways to contribute. And I'm looking for questions in the participant window, and I am not seeing any. So thank you. We will move on. Item 4, we are approving addendum number 1 to this Community Choice Aggregation Implementation Plan and Statement of Intent to address PCE expansion to the city of Los Banos. Jan, are you starting on this one?
We're going to have Leslie present this.
Pardon me. Leslie, go ahead.
Okay. Yes. So this is the implementation plan. You can go to the next slide, Shane, that'd be great. So we have an addendum. So when Peninsula Clean Energy first formed, we had to file an implementation plan with the CPUC. A lot of you are familiar with that. This is an addendum to that initial implementation plan, so like an amendment to include the expansion into Los Banos. So just a couple of highlights. If you can hit the, yep. So this is required by the CPUC for new or expanding CCA territories. And some, just what's included in this plan, the highlights are our enrollment timeline in customer noticing plan, projected new customer count, projected new retail sales through 2025, projected new procurement obligations through 2025, you know, and several other, you know, sort of required items, but this is sort of the main gist of what's going on in this implementation plan. It's giving a public notice to the CPUC staff. Will also, you know, be available, you know, through other noticing channels about our intent to expand into Los Banos and a general picture of what that's going to look like for PCE and for City of Los Banos. And then we've been coordinating with outside counsel to submit this to the CPUC, assuming the board passes this tonight. The plan is to submit this tomorrow. So, does anyone have any questions?
Okay. Questions for Leslie on this one?
Okay.
And we are approving this, correct? So we do need to.
Yes, the request
Okay.
to approve it so we can submit it.
Yeah. If there are no questions, I can entertain a motion on item 4.
So moved, Redwood City.
Second, Milbury.
Okay. And I see Tom Faria's got his hand up. Tom, go ahead and comment, and I'll take public comment after that.
Oh, I was raising my hand to motion. I don't know the procedure, but the motion's been made and seconded already. So we're pleased to see this move forward in Los Banos. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tom, and we're pleased to have you joining us informally. And so, sorry, I guess I could have asked you to make the motion. I apologize,
No
but it has been moved
Happy to be
and
here.
seconded. Yeah. Okay, great. Is there public comment on item 4? Again, please raise your hand in the participant window so I can see you. If there's, I don't see any. If there's no public comment, is there any other discussion of the motion? If not, then Anne, roll call vote, please.
Okay. All right. If you would please announce your approval or disapproval of the motion when I announce your jurisdiction. County of San Mateo.
Yes.
County of San Mateo. Town of Atherton.
Yes.
City of Belmont.
Yes.
City of Brisbane.
Yes.
City of Burlingame.
Yes.
Town of Colma. City of Daly City.
Yes.
City of East Palo Alto. City of Foster City. City of Half Moon Bay.
Yes.
Town of Hillsborough.
Yes.
City of Los Banos.
Okay.
Yes.
No hay mucho tiempo antes que tu mamá termina su llamada.
City of Menlo Park.
Yes.
5 minutos.
City of Millbrae.
Yes.
City of Pacifica.
Yes.
Ajá.
Town of Portola Valley.
Yes.
Oh,
City of
okay,
Redwood City.
Yes.
City of San Bruno.
Yes.
City of San Carlos.
Yes.
City of San Mateo.
Yes.
City of South San Francisco.
Yes.
Town of Woodside.
Yes.
And the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, everyone. And welcome again to Los Banos. And I actually just want to take a moment and thank Jan and I'm going to forget people. Mainly, I guess I was thinking Jan and the Rick DeGolia and Rick Bonilla, who worked a lot with the central, with with Merced County, and particularly with Los Banos, to get them joining. And I'm very excited about this. So thank you all, and everyone else who has been part of this. And thank you, Leslie. And we'll move on. Item 5, we are approving participation in California Community Power, Joint Powers Authority, and delegating authority to the CEO to execute the JPA with that group. We reviewed this at Executive Committee, and Jan will explain sort of the background of it here. So Jan, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Can I have the next slide, please? Next slide, please. Okay. So what I will go over tonight is which CCAs are participating in this Joint Powers Agency, the kind of business and political context of it and the benefits of it, the long duration storage requests for offers, which is the first project that this JPA is taking on, and then get into the JPA agreement and how that would work. And so I'll run through this. If we can have the next slide, please. So the participating JPAs, there's 9 of us. So Clean Power SF, Central Coast Community Energy, formerly Monterey Bay, East Bay, Marin, us, Redwood Coast, San Jose, Silicon Valley, and Sonoma. And the next slide shows that, you know, the overall load that these CCAs represent is about 30,000 gigawatt hours. Which is fairly substantial, and it represents 2.8 million customer accounts. And the peak load of this group is about 5.8 megawatts. So it's fairly substantial, and by banding together with all of this purchasing power, the idea is that we would be able to get some, use the economies of scale to get some good opportunities. If we can go to the next slide, please. So the benefits of this joint action is, as I mentioned, the economies of scale, that we could contract for a large project that would be too large for us individually to contract for, but when we put everyone together, it makes sense to do it. We would have an enhanced negotiating power with developers because it's a big project, and we'll get a lot of interest. And we did get a lot of interest on the RFO. We will be able to share the risk between all of the CCAs that are involved in the project. There's a potential for shared financing, and there's also strategic advantages to doing this. There needs to be some new resources to replace retiring gas plants and the retiring Diablo Canyon. And if we show that we are moving forward to put in large-scale storage, then the likelihood of the PUC ordering the utility to do this and putting those costs on us is less. And then also the legislators, favor seeing this, and the regulators favor seeing us work together, because then it makes it easier for them to see what we're doing. So if we go to the next slide, the first project that we're looking at is a long duration storage project. So we issued an RFO for long duration storage with the idea that it would be a minimum of 8 hours of discharge in front of the meter project. So a big project connected with a utility scale project, commercial operation by 2026. At least 10-year term, and a minimum of 50 megawatts size. And the next slide shows the schedule for this. Proposals came in on December 1st, and over 50 developers submitted offers. And the procurement teams of all of the utilities, or all of the CCAs, and actually there's 8 CCAs that are participating in this. The 9 that I showed you on that previous slide, minus East Bay. And the procurement teams are now going through the detailed proposals, analyzing those, and figuring out which ones are the best ones. And then they will go back to those top projects and ask for additional information, such as more information about their labor plans and things like that, things that we know are important to us. The negotiations for those PPAs will happen in the spring and summer, and then the goal is that final contract would be approved in the summer. So if we go to the next slide, we'll get back to the JPA agreement. So the JPA has broad powers that match its members' powers, and it's fairly broadly stated as to what this JPA can do. So it can develop, acquire, construct, own, manage, contract for, engage in, finance, and or provide energy-related programs for the use of and by its members. So it was purposely made broad so that, so there would be a lot of flexibility. A member may exit the JPA, but they have to pay their pro rata share of previously incurred debts. And it's modeled after a couple of other procurement JPAs that municipal utilities have. One is NCPA, the Northern California Power Agency, and SCAPA, the Southern California Public Power Agency, which multiple municipal utilities participate in those. And actually I have Tony Braun from Braun Blazing, who is the lead author of the JPA agreement, is here tonight to answer questions. And he has many years of experience in working with these joint agencies and working with the municipal utilities and how it works with them. So once we get into questions, Tony's available here. Next slide. So the governance is that it would be, the board would be composed of the CEOs of the members. Each member would have an equal voting share. And for simple changes, the majority of those in attendance could approve those, but significant changes would require 2/3 of the entire board. And of course, anything that, any decision to participate in a project or approve expenditures that would affect PCE of more than 100,000 would come to this board for approval first. Next slide, please. So the idea is that there will be some administrative costs that will be shared equally among the members. And the idea is to keep these administrative costs at the bare minimum. And then once a project is decided on, the majority of the costs would be assigned to the project. So there would be a part-time contracted general manager, part-time contract general counsel. So basically this JPA would not have any employees. And the costs are expected to be about $10,000 to $30,000 a month or annually for this overall G&A expenses among those 9 CCAs. So about $100,000 to $270,000 per year in expenses for the administrative costs, but then any project-specific cost would be paid for by those participants of those projects. So if we can go to the next slide, it kind of outlines how projects would be would progress. So the first phase would be project exploration, and that's kind of where we are right now with the long duration storage. So the group determines whether there's a need for a project, an RFO. The JPAs that are CCAs that are interested in it sign a participation agreement to be involved in the RFO, and the costs are allocated evenly across all of the CCAs involved in that. So then once all of the bids are in and the short lists are determined, then it moves to phase 2, where the CCAs decide which projects they want to be a part of. A negotiation team is put together to start negotiating a power purchase agreement with the project. And then depending on how much share of a project a CCA has, they would be allocated that percent of a project. So say we decide to do a, let's see, there's 8 of us, an 80 megawatt project, or let's say 100 megawatt long duration storage project. Then, and if we decided that we wanted to be a part of it, and if our share of that project based on our load or based on our desire was 10% of it, then we would get 10 megawatts of that project, and we'd be paying 10% of the costs for the whole process of bringing that project to operations. So the costs for the negotiations, the costs for any other ancillary costs in getting that project going would be split only among those CCAs that are part of the project. And then the final phase is a project commitment, where each CCA that wants to be part of the project will sign a project agreement. Well, no, let me get the terminology exactly right here. So the JPA itself would be the party that signs the PPA with the developer. And then within the JPA, those CCAs that are project participants would have a separate agreement that talks about says that what their obligations are to that project, and the developer in the PPA would agree that its sole source of remedy is limited to the parties who have signed the project participation agreement. So those CCAs that are not part of the project would not be signing the project participation agreement, and therefore they would not be liable for any damages based if anything happened with that project. There would also be an operating agreement on how the project is going to be run. So say we want the project to provide us with storage at certain seasons and certain times of the day, and certain things like that. Other CCAs might want different things. So we would all have to come to agreement on how that project would be operated and get that signed off. And then the cost allocation would be based again on the project participation share. If we were a 10% participant in a project, we would pay 10% of the costs. If we can go to the next slide, please. So the project risk mitigation, this is one of the areas that the executive committee had a number of questions on, so I'm spending a lot of time trying to talk about this. So the power purchase agreement is between CC Power, the JPA, and the developer, but then there's the project participation agreement between the JPA and members who are going to be receiving the power from that power purchase agreement. And so those agreements are linked. And then there's a project operating agreement on who's participating in the project. So the timeline, if we can go to the next slide, the idea is to get approval by the governing boards of the 9 CCAs this month and next month. And then once all of the CCAs have, once we determine who is part of it, then we would all sign the JPA agreement in February, and the first board meeting of CC Power would be in February. As far as the long duration storage project goes, the evaluation of the bids is expected to be taking place over the next 3 months. The negotiation of the PPA will go over a number of months. Actually, they're projecting October. Initially, it was July. And that everything would be finalized in October, including the PPA, the project participation agreements of the CCAs who are going to be part of that, and the operating agreements for the for that project. So what we're asking for tonight is approval for us to participate in this and delegation of authority to execute the JPA agreement. So if we could go back 2 slides, or just 1 slide. So showing the schedule, the idea is to have all of the founding CCAs sign the JPA in February. So we're bringing this to you tonight. If there are additional questions that the board wants to have answered, we want to make sure that everyone is completely comfortable with this. So if you feel that you're not ready to sign off on this tonight, we can bring it back again in January. We do think it's of strategic importance for PCE to be a part of this JPA. You know, contracting for long duration storage is going to be necessary in order for us to meet our 2025 24/7 renewables goal. But you know, happy to answer questions, and we've got Tony here. We also have Ilana here, who's been on our side from the attorney's office to answer any questions that people might have. So we're here to address those.
Okay, thank you, Jan. I'll move on to board questions. I was just going to emphasize one point about sort of the advantage of doing this, and we realized in our executive committee discussion that the 2.8 million customer accounts that this group comprises is roughly equal to the number of generation accounts that remained with PG&E. So if there is a developer out there looking to market a large storage project, they now have sort of a comparable organization to PG&E. I mean, it would be a lot easier to go to PG&E than to go to a bunch of smaller CCAs, but now we've got one organization that can sort of take these pitches in, take these requests in, and sort of, I think it's just a way of leveling the field in terms of attracting interest from a developer who might be looking to sort of sell a large project as simply as possible. So Tiger has his hand up. Go ahead, Tiger.
Thank you very much. And I'm brand new, don't know much going in. So if my question is overly simplistic, I apologize in advance.
Not at all.
That being said, for me, it's always helpful to just have a little history about how we come to the place we're at. And so my question is simply, did we come to the conclusion we need more storage? And then we looked into it and the PPA would be the best way to figure out how to find that storage? Or were we investigating, JPAs? Or were we investigating JPAs and then we thought, oh, and another benefit of JPA is then we might actually find the storage that we're going to need?
I think it's actually a combination of the two. Okay. So we have identified that storage is an important component for us to meet our 2025 goal, because if we're 100% renewable, some of the renewables don't generate all the time. You know, the solar generates only during the daytime. So if we have excess solar generation, we store it in some kind of storage device, a battery or whatever it might be, and then we can put that power into the grid at the time that our customers need it. Similarly for wind, it's intermittent. It usually is fairly complementary to solar. But again, it's not always there all the time. So having the storage allows us to store that renewable power and then inject it into the grid when our customers need it. We have been talking, you know, all of the CCAs, there's 23 CCAs right now. We're all part of a trade association called CalCCA, but we're not doing this through CalCCA. It's just those CCAs that are interested have decided to work on this together. And for the last couple of years, we've been working closely with the local CCAs that we're a part of. So East Bay, San Jose, Silicon Valley, Monterey Bay, and us have been meeting regularly and talking about what kinds of things could we do together to leverage our buying power and to also, you know, avoid duplication of effort. So recently there's been a lot of interest in storage. The Public Utilities Commission, the ISO, you know, when there's rolling blackouts, it's like, how do we provide the reliability we need? And because we prefer to have a clean alternative, we'd prefer that to be energy storage as opposed to building more natural gas plants. So that's part of what's behind here. We've also been looking at other things that we might do together, like we all have the same kind of back office needs for processing meter readings and doing billing and things like that. So at a future time, we may decide to aggregate that and see if we can find a less expensive solution for us. So But so that's why the JPA mission, or what it's able to do, has been written fairly broadly. But the first thing that we're looking at here is the long duration storage.
Thank you very much. It sounds very much like a natural next step based on what already has been going on. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Tiger. Anne, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a couple of questions. Is it better for me to ask one at a time?
It depends how complicated they are.
Yeah, go ahead. Ask one and then we'll, one
Okay. So my first one, I think I heard you, Director Pepper, say that the other CCAs are in line with us in terms of labor. But I'm going back because I'm only an alternate, so I'm here or there. Are they also in line with us in terms of local hiring and trying to cite local projects? And then the one with my hat that I typically wear is when we choose an energy project, everything has adverse effects, but what are their adverse effects on wildlife?
Okay.
And if they're in line with us, yay.
I can't really answer that they are all in line with us. So I think that as far as our policies on labor, we are probably the most, we probably look at that most closely out of most of the CCAs. I think Marin also looks closely at labor, but some of the other CCAs are not as concerned about that. So that will be one area where we will have to be working harder to get them to see our point of view. And also we may need to be a little flexible as well, but we'll see. I don't know yet on that. Local hiring, I think in general, CCAs being community organizations are interested in local hiring. So I think we're all pretty much aligned there. But as far as whether that hiring is union or not union, we may not be in alignment there. And then as far as adverse effects on wildlife, it would depend on the technology. So for example, if we're doing a pumped hydro project, if that requires a new dam to be constructed and a new area to be flooded for the water, hold the water and all that, there may be more impacts than a battery project that's in multiple trailers sitting on a flat piece of land somewhere. So it really depends. There's a lot of different technologies that have been bid into this RFO, and we're in the process of evaluating all of those. But we are definitely always looking at what are the environmental impacts of any project. And so, you can be assured that we'll also be looking at that too.
Very good. Then my other question, just using the first project of long duration storage, is if we have incredible distributive generation creation here, but we're committed to a certain amount of battery storage, will we end up having to pay for power we won't need?
I don't think that will be the case because we have large power needs, and I don't think that we're going to be able to use distributed energy to meet the majority of our energy needs. It'll be meeting some of our needs, but we're still going to need to have large projects in order to meet our total needs. So I don't anticipate that being a problem.
I vaguely recall years ago us talking about put or pay contracts, but if that should come up, feel free to reach out to me. In my industry, put or pay contracts are something that cities get trapped in all the time, basically paying for landfill space they won't use. So happy with this. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Ann.
Thanks, Ann. Clayton's got his hand up. Go ahead, Clayton.
Thank you. This is less of a question and more just kind of a observation and some information. The location of or the siting of battery storage facilities is suddenly become very popular in our town. We've currently have one applicant who I believe is going through the RFO process. And we have a second applicant, which I don't believe are, that has going through an attempt to get a general plan change. Because our general plan never contemplated this type of use, and the potential siting of it in an area. The environmental issues are actually, I think, a fairly significant concern, and it really has more to do with the area that it's going into than the use itself. But that's just kind of interesting that this has gotten to be very hot, and we're hearing from at least two potential significant projects in our community.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's good to know, Clay, and we'll touch base with you on that. I think it'd be good for us to, since you're in the midst of it and looking at the permitting and all of that, it'll be good for us to get firsthand
That is an interesting development. Yeah.
Important to you.
Anytime.
Okay. Thanks, Clayton. Rick DeGolia, go ahead.
Sorry, I was unmuted. Okay, I've got a question which concerns slide 39. So can you go back 2 slides?
I think you're on it.
Okay, so let me understand exactly how this works. We've got the overriding JPA, which well, I'm assuming is formed. This is Community Power JPA, and that the members of that JPA, no doubt at the board and with support from outside of the board, engage in the phase 1 project exploration and determine the need for a project. I'm assuming, and let me just say what my assumption is, and then Jan, if you could please correct it. I'm assuming that the JPA as an organization launches the RFO, but it's conceivable that there will be CCAs that are members of the JPA that aren't interested in that project exploration. So my first question is, and this is all process, but my first question is, if less than all 9 of the CCAs decide that they want to explore the project, then how is that managed in phase 1? And I understand that how that was managed in the current long duration storage is that this Community Power JPA didn't exist, and it was 8 of the CCAs that have decided to form the Community Power JPA that went together to do the project exploration for the long duration storage. But once the JPA is formed, it sounds like the proposal may be that if only 8 of the CCAs want to engage in the exploration, that it will be the overriding organization that will do that. So that's one question. And I just want to follow through on the next phases to understand it. And then the second phase is you've gotten a response to the RFO that went out under phase 1, and initially, certainly you would expect that full group that participated in phase 1 to participate in phase 2, which would be negotiating, choosing which partner to seek a project with from the RFO response, and negotiating the PPA or whatever the form of agreement is that you enter into. At some point, it would be reasonable to assume that one or more of those participating JPAs drop out. But it sounds like the concept is that this Community Power JPA will be responsible for this negotiations. And I'm just wondering how it will be handled when there are less than all of the members that are participating in phase 2, because the cost allocation is obviously going to, based on a percentage share of the subscribed projects. And if somebody drops out in the course of that negotiation because they don't like the terms of the negotiation, and how does that apply? How does that dealt with? And then finally in phase 3, we're down to the actual project. So there's been negotiations, you've come up with a PPA and you're about to enter into that PPA. And it sounds like the proposal is that the overriding full JPA of 9 CCAs will sign the agreement, but there will be a contractual term in the agreement that limits liability only to those members that participate in the agreement, and which could obviously be a subset of the whole, and in fact, it could be a subset of those that participated in phase 2. So I'm sorry for the complicated question, but it's a complicated structure, and I think it's really important for our board to understand how each of these phases will work and how they will apply, you know, to the whole versus to some subset of the whole.
Okay, yeah, it is a complicated setup, and I will attempt to answer it, and I'll ask Tony if he can. Tony, are you still here? If he can weigh in if I, yes, if I speak in error. But the way I understand it, for the phase 1, is that those costs are, so the board will talk and say, okay, well, let's look at a long duration storage project. Raise your hand if you're interested in looking at a long duration storage project. So of the 9 CCAs that are part of the JPA, in this case, eight of them raised their hands. And so those 8 signed this participation agreement for going through the RFO, and any costs associated with the RFO are allocated equally among those 8 CCAs.
And is that proposed to be use the same structure even after this JPA is formed?
Yes, I believe so, yes.
Okay, so if there's a project, whatever project number 2 comes along in 6 months or whatever, if 7 want to explore it, then those 7 will sign up and they'll enter into the participation agreement. So it won't be the community power JPA that signs the participation agreement. It'll be the same as what we've just done.
Yes.
Okay, great. That answers that question. That's very helpful.
And then for phase 2, so those 7 CCAs that signed the participation agreement would then be the ones involved in this phase 2 evaluation, where, well, and actually I might ask Tony to help me here. I think if you sign up for a project, then the costs that have been incurred for the negotiation of the PPA would be assigned to those people who are in it. If someone drops out halfway through, I don't know. Tony, can you help explain what this is set to? And maybe you can introduce yourself, Tony, what your background is, what you've done before, so that the board understands your.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this. My name's Tony Braun, as you've heard. I am the founder of a firm, Braun, Blazing, Smith & Wynn, that has been working with public agencies and electricity areas for approximately 25 years. We are almost exclusively a firm that serves public agencies, and that includes many of the publicly owned utilities or municipal utilities in the state, but also approximately half of the CCAs in the state. And we work with several of the JPAs that have used these structures or things like them to develop infrastructure, energy infrastructure. So several of the long high voltage transmission lines that go across multiple states in the West, and dozens of generation projects have in fact been financed by public agencies through these types of structures. And it's exciting to us to see the CCAs at least considering these things. And these are really, really good and important questions. And if I can help in any way to clarify them, that is, I very much appreciate helping do that.
Tony, can I just ask, does that mean that your firm does not represent the IOUs?
We do not represent the IOUs, and we don't represent any of the developer interests either.
Great.
I like to think of the colored on this chart as increasing levels of commitment. Right. So as Jan indicated, when you're in the exploration phase, and this first potential set of projects or project long duration storage is a little bit unique because everything developed in parallel. And I think that's actually the source of a lot of the questions, right? Is because there was a perceived advantage, and I think a realized advantage given the robust level of interest in the RFO. The RFO and the development of the potential JPA here is happening in parallel, and so things are a little bit wonky, not completely linear, but still I think very similar concepts apply. The green phase is an exploration phase. The level of commitment is low. You raise your hand and you agree, and the participating CCAs agreed to informal cost sharing agreement to help run that RFO. There will be an analysis of the results. We'll see the comfort level in the short list, and then there will be another the purple or blue, I'm not sure what you'd call this phase here, where it's a bit more binding, and you're saying, yes, I really am interested. I am going to agree to help pay for a percentage of the costs to work through the subscription and negotiations phase. That's a self-nominating amount, so it's not necessarily like an equal share or a load ratio share. It's a self-nominating amount. And then the way I like to think of it, Jan, and these things are subject to some negotiations still because they're out there and they're happening in real time. Once you've agreed to that blue phase, and we're not talking about millions of dollars here, you're agreeing to and getting the benefit from that further development of the commercial structures. And then there's an agreement to pay as for those efforts. And then you get much more binding, and that's when you're getting into the final phase 3 here, where you're saying, yes, I am going to sign up for the project, and here's the percentage of the project that I'm interested in. I would note that this is the structures or things like them came out of an evolution. The first JPAs were one for all for one. They weren't this menu or cafeteria plan. So if you agreed to be in the joint powers agreement, you agreed that whatever share that you had agreed to take, you were going to be bound by that. And ultimately that became a source of tension among the JPA members. And this cafeteria plan rolled out of that, where you have much more choices, and you're not having enforced participation in projects that may not fit the needs of the individual joint member of the JPA. And so that, of course, the cafeteria plan is more complicated, but it does allow much more individual freedom of action. And then in that area, the JPA really is like an umbrella organization. It facilitates, it attracts the scale to lower costs. It facilitates the project management, and as such shares costs and hopefully realizes some cost savings. So that's the the background as to how these, which are admittedly complex structures, came about. I would like to add, and it was referenced in one of Jan's slides, when you are in this last phase, usually, and it's not necessary, but usually there's a level of commitment that is maybe even incrementally above. So if each, I'm a lawyer, I'm not good at math, so there's 5 members and everyone's a 20% share of the project. Usually there's a step-up provision in that, and that's binding to take us another small increment in case one of the members fails. And the reason for that is that helps defray the development risk and makes the projects more financeable for the developer, because we're talking about in aggregate projects that are likely to be in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So the project developer is going to have to finance that project. And so usually, and again, I'd stress they're not necessary, but usually there is a step-up provision in there, and that is included in one of the earlier descriptive slides that Jan went over. And above that step-up obligation of the project participant, the developer takes the remaining risk. So that's sort of an outline, but these are structures that have worked. I wouldn't call them simple. That's for sure.
So Jeff, can I just follow up with a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
This isn't a comment, this is a question. So Tony, I mean, based on your description, that sounds very clear to me. I like the different colors. I like the level of stepped up commitment. That makes total sense. It sounds like if less than 100% of the members of the JPA participate in phase 1, as less than all 9 of the prospective members chose to participate in the current RFO, 8 of them did, then that less than the whole number of CCAs could launch the exploration. There's no need for the overall organization to be a contracting party there. That makes sense. And then if that number happens to be reduced, but for whatever reason, when you get to the next level of commitment, that makes total sense to me that the participants would enter into an agreement. That doesn't, again, involve the overall, let's call it the parent JPA in this context, that lesser number of CCAs enter into an agreement to cover the costs, which aren't a huge cost in phase 2. And it's reasonable that somebody's going to drop out. It could easily be that there's a workforce provision that we don't like and we decide to drop out, or some other reason that somebody drops out. And in phase 3, this is where the real money hits the road. I don't see any reason for the parent JPA to be the contracting party in phase 3 if only 5 of the CCAs choose to do phase 3. Those 5 could contract. Now, I understand that the developer wants to deal with one party, not 5 different parties. That I totally get that, but it doesn't sound to me like in this case that there's a requirement that the parent JPA be the contracting party in phase 3, but maybe I'm wrong, and that's my question.
So it's absolutely correct to say there's not a requirement. So there are multiple structures in which the projects are jointly developed. We have represented public agencies that have multi-party agreements, right? So I think what you're describing in here is you have half of the JPA members are and each one of them is individually a party to an agreement with a developer. I think it's commercially less desirable for the developer, and therefore is less attractive. I've also seen instances where you still have a lot of the same performance What you would do there, obviously, is insulate non-project participants solely and completely. There would be no potential, even no matter how small the risk might be, of it spilling into the JPA itself. So there's certainly not a legal requirement that it be done through the JPA. What I have seen develop, however, is that you get an ease of administration and you get an ease of the market understanding how it's going to do business with the JPA. So the Southern California Public Power Authority that Jan referenced, they have done, and I want to say 25 renewable deals, something like that. So it's very efficient, right? The developers have worked with them on multiple contracts. It's the same negotiating team. There's the pinch points are known. They actually become a central hub where developers come and pitch projects to the JPA because they know they've done business with them before and the JPA has a track record of successful development. So there's certainly not a legal obligation to do it through a joint powers authority, but it has worked and brought efficiencies in other areas, and that's why I think people are seriously considering it.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions on this from the board? If not, I could entertain a motion.
Wait, before you get to
Dave had a hand up earlier.
need to have comment.
Oh,
I think
well,
we need public comment.
what I was going to do is call for the motion and then call for public comment and our discussion of the motion after that.
Okay, I would make a motion.
Okay.
I would make a motion to, as Jan suggested we could do, put it off for a month so that allows us time to further examine what both Rick DeGolia and Tony both said was not a simple matter. You know, I was concerned when we were at the executive committee meeting because I felt that I had not really been informed very well, and then asked about bringing this forward to the full board. And I really am seeing right now, there's a lot of very detailed information. We have many new members. I think we have other members. I think a few of the members may really understand all of this, but I don't feel comfortable. I think it was brought too quickly and a lot is being asked of the board. So I spoke with some other people about it today who I hope they will speak up about this under comments, because there seems to be a feeling in this way of thinking by several other members. And so I would make a motion that we put it off for a month, maybe appoint an ad hoc committee to get some answers to some of the long lists of questions that I have, well, 2 pages of questions that I have in my big writing. But because I think we need some other answers, and I can go into that more under comments, but that's my motion.
Okay, that's a move to table. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Okay. Then in that case, I will call for public comment, and then we can discuss that motion. Is there any member of the public that wants to comment on the item as presented? Okay, I don't see any. So Donna has her hand up. Donna, go ahead.
Thank you. So yes, I can really appreciate Rick's comments, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who have a lot of questions. I probably don't have as many, probably because I've been through this presentation, I think 3 or 4 times, plus had, you know, some more detailed information. But talking to Jan directly, but my biggest concern on this is that it is complicated. There is a lot of information, but at some point, the role of the board is not going to be necessarily to negotiate this situation, and we have to get our heads around the big concept and then allow the staff to work out details with our broad concerns, and then maybe, you know, work it out along the way and report back. I guess I'm just really concerned about a 4-page long, set of concerns. I just need to understand, maybe from our legal team here, what is the board's role on this? Are we negotiating this deal as a board, or is this the staff's role? And, we're just providing oversight and big level guidance.
Does staff or council want to address that?
So do you want me to take that, Alana, or do you want to take that?
Go ahead.
So Donna, I think right here we're talking about a JPA agreement, which is, I think that for those who aren't super familiar with them, I'd liken it to Articles of Incorporation. It's a formation document that describes the organization of the entity. So and the requirements of that agreement are fairly routine. They come out of 6500 at sequential of the government code. So the agreement itself, I don't know that the agreement itself is that significant. It's really the structure. It's the fact that you're going to create this thing and it's going to be doing these things that is significant. And so, I don't know if that's responsive. Perhaps I can get a little help kind of steering this conversation in the most positive direction. But, if the board has concerns about, the idea that PCE would participate in a structure like this, then the board should express those. The board can either approve or not approve participation. That's absolutely the board's prerogative. As far as the terms of the JPA agreement itself, I don't know that there's a lot in there that is generally negotiable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's kind of my point that I'm sort of getting to, is that there's a broad overarching, sorry, my internet is telling me I'm unstable, but which is probably true. So the broader arching issue is the overall JPA, and then there's the details to be negotiated, and then there's each particular project's details, which would be very difficult to anticipate at this time. So laying all of that out as subcontext in the JPA doesn't seem like it would actually be feasible. So I guess what I appreciate from Jeff is this focus on sort of, maybe bite-sized pieces, the bigger, broader organization, and then sort of moving through that. I just don't know how, I don't know if we will be able to answer every single one of the questions. So I'm just trying to focus the board's efforts a little more macro.
Yeah, and I don't know obviously I haven't heard all of the questions,
exactly.
But the board is not ceding its authority. The board ultimately has a great deal of authority. I'm not suggesting it should do any of these things I'm about to suggest, but for example, say the board didn't want PCE to participate in any projects that didn't involve paying prevailing wage or a project labor agreement. The board could so direct Jan not to participate in any project like that. The board could, ask direct Jan to bring any project participation to it before she agreed to it with the JPA. The board could do a lot of things to exercise its authority. This is really just, does the board want to participate at all in a super JPA, that has a goal of doing these big projects. But I was not personally involved in the negotiation of this. Alana was, and also Mr. Braun was. So I would defer to them if I have misspoken.
Go ahead, Jan.
If I could just add a little bit, if we can just go to slide 35. The governance is such that any decision to participate in anything that would be beyond my authority to approve would come to the board. So any, for a phase 1 type project that where the expenditure is not going to be very much, I could probably, it would be less than 100,000. Like right now, the cost to issue this RFO for the long duration storage split between 8 CCAs is pretty minimal. But if we decide once the projects are selected and we've put in our 2 cents with the whole group as to which projects we think are most interesting, any decision to participate in a project at that point would come to the board, because the amount of expenditure for us would exceed $100,000. And then, similarly, once it comes down to actually, signing on to an agreement, that obviously would need to come to the board first. So we would use the same process we use now. We would use, we would, as staff, would call together a number of the board members that are interested in procurement, like we do now for any project that we're considering, to go over it with you, to get your buy-in before we bring it to the full board, and make sure we vet it. So we would not be making any decisions. It's not really any different than how we look at projects now. The advantage is that from a political perspective and from a regulatory perspective, the regulators don't like dealing with 23 CCAs. They like the idea of the CCAs working together and bringing, doing larger projects together so that it makes their life easier. And it shows that we are coordinated, that we're not all going off in different directions, but that we have some common goals and that we can work together for these goals, especially for reliability, which is what the long duration storage projects will provide to the state. So it just shows that we're thinking ahead and we're acting and, exhibiting the behavior that we should to be, good stewards of what's needed for the state.
Mr. Chair, before we go much farther, I think maybe what I said was not fully understood. Could I have a chance to clarify some things?
Sure.
Okay, I made a motion to table for 1 month, and I did not make a motion to deny. I simply wanted to have a chance for the members of the board to gain more information. And I want to describe my concerns, okay, that I think other members of the board may want to have a chance to discuss. Because I see, like, when, for instance, during the executive committee meeting, we were told, when I asked, can we make some changes? Can we, add a section to this of our own regarding our concerns, especially regarding labor, which is always one of my main concerns. And we were told that no, it's a done deal. But when I look at the actual resolution, I see there under section 8, where both San Francisco and San Jose have their own sections in there addressing some of their own needs for their jurisdiction. So, I mean, I had several questions regarding making changes, that there were no provisions for labor in there in any way possible. I think that there needs to be some discussion amongst board members somehow. There has been no study session, by the way, for this item with board members. And I think if we ask board members, many of them will say, this is the first time I've heard of it. And I'm pretty sure they'll have some questions too. I think that, let me go down my notes here. Yeah, when I asked about policy 10, which is our labor policy, I was told that it was not included. And there was confusion about how PCE would seek to assert our desires regarding our labor policy. And actually, I see also we have a policy regarding unbundled recs. And I noticed that this entity can purchase unbundled recs. So, I mean, I think a question we need to get clarity on is, would we participate in that kind of a purchase? Or, would we actually say, no, we don't want to be part of that? The information says that new members will be entertained in the future. In fact, I think Article 3 membership says that they will be open to additional members, which is why I didn't understand at the executive committee meeting why we were told that it had to be approved at this board meeting. So I was happy to see when Jan said we can approve it now or we can approve it next month, okay, which is why my motion. On January 25th, as backup for this, on January 25th, 2 days ago, the San Francisco Board of Supervisors had this brought to them as a question whether they should affiliate. They heard it, they asked them questions, they referred it to a committee under their 30-day rule. It will not come back to the board until it finishes at that committee at least 30 days or more. At least 30 days from the 15th, 2 days ago. So I think we do have time to have some discussion, some additional questions. I think there are too many unanswered questions that need to be examined more closely. Not that we're going to change. Now, frankly, I think this is a great idea. I really like it. I just want to make sure that the board is all clear on what we're entering into and that we get our concerns addressed to the best of our ability to do so. And one final thing. No, that's it. So those are my concerns. And we can go ahead with, other people having heard that can go ahead and make their comments. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Carlos, go ahead.
Yes, I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Sorry, I asked the chair's indulgence for showing up at 7:40. I just got out of an ABAG meeting, but I want to speak to the motion in support of the motion. I actually do see some economies of scale, coordination, and other efficiencies that come out of this potentially entering into a JPA agreement of this nature. But I would agree that it would be best to take a little more time to discuss and then agree upon it. And if indeed there are some changes that we may want to make and we can't make them, then that could change our mind as to whether we actually want to enter into the agreement. But so I am definitely in support of waiting a month and reviewing this in the interim. Thank you all.
Okay, Rick DeGolia, go ahead.
See if can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, so first of all, I think it's really important for us to be moving beyond the limitations of our own CCA. And I think staff has taken that issue in hand in a couple different ways in forming the MAG 5 and in helping to form or contemplating this JPA. I definitely think that there's value in size, and I think it's important that the size of this community power JPA exceeds the size of PG&E, of their generation size. So I think that the mass that exists here has real value. It's an asset that we need to take advantage of, and I support it. I have absolutely no problem putting this off till July. So I mean to January. So I'm in favor of the motion. That's not a problem. But I want to make sure we're going to explore the issues in that month. And this is not an easy month because it's a holiday and people are busy. And I just so my comment based on coming off of the questions that I asked previously is there's a concern for how those CCAs that are in the larger overall structure are protected when they choose not to enter into an agreement that has some real liability associated with it. And that's one issue, and that's a very big issue. And the second issue is if one of those CCAs that are parties to the agreement subsequently decides to leave the agreement, how is that liability managed in the course of that person leaving. And I asked these questions at the executive committee, and basically the answer was, it really doesn't matter right now. Those are relevant to the operating agreement and the stage 3 agreement where the real liability exists. And I think that's, and I don't have a problem with that analysis, but I do have some concern with the structure. And I'll tell you where my concern comes in. And Tony and David and Alana, I would appreciate any comment you have. I'm not trying to address the structure of this JPA agreement. I agree with everything that David said. We could add some things to the JPA agreement like Rick has suggested. And I haven't looked at what San Francisco and San Jose did, but I'm really glad to know that they've added things. And I think that if they've added things, I don't see why we couldn't add things. So I think that's something we need to look at over the next month. The area that I raised at the executive committee and that I've tried to pursue in my questions previously are, I think that the structure here is that because it is that the overriding JPA would enter into the actual operating agreement in stage 3, and there would be a clause in that agreement that would give protection to those CCAs that choose not to participate in that operating agreement, to where the developer would agree that they will make no claim if there's some liability that arises against the non-participating CCAs. And what I raised at the executive committee and what I've thought about since then, and I feel even more strongly about now, is that's a contractual provision in a contract that gives protection to the non-participants, and that's as good as a contractual provision is. But we all know there are times where that the protective provision of that contractual term gets pierced, and that protective veil gets shredded, and then there's an issue of liability. And what I raised was, well, why not go a step further? Take advantage of the larger entity that's going to be formed, not have 6 or 7 individual CCAs contract as separate entities. I know why a developer wouldn't want to deal with that. That's complex. And what Tony said makes all kinds of sense, which is you establish a pattern and you build both a reputation and a team that actually affects provisions, contracts, and actually moves the market. And I think that makes lots of sense. But I think you get the same thing if you create an entity. Maybe it's not using the overriding JPA. Maybe it's I've done it in the investment world with LLCs, and I don't think the difference between an LLC and a JPA is all that great. I don't frankly understand what the nuances are, but I know David would. And but if you create an entity, and David, where you were talking about the entity here, I'm really looking at that operating agreement. You could, I don't know why you couldn't create an entity of the subset that wants to participate, and then that entity gives, because it doesn't include the non-participants, I think it gives greater protection to the non-participants than a contractual clause in an agreement that's designed to protect them.
Okay, so I'm going to see, I may end up punting twice in one play, but let me see whether I can answer the liability question easily. And if I haven't answered it, then I'm going to punt that to Tony.
David,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt. Ilana requested to make a comment earlier. I don't know if this is the same topic, but she might want to address
I think
this.
it's
I'm not sure.
yeah, I think it's the second thing that I was going to punt to her, which is the issue of the San Francisco / San Jose thing. So on the liability issue, there's a provision of the government code. I think it's 6508.1 of the government code that specifically allows when you set up a JPA to make the liabilities of the JPA only the liabilities of the JPA and not of the constituent members. That's something that you can do. It's something PCE did, which is why none of the cities who make up PCE are liable for any of the debts of PCE. And in the same vein, I believe, let me just, yes, and in section 8.01 of this draft JPA agreement, the agreement provides that the liabilities of CC Power are CC Power alone and not of the constituent members. So I think the constituent members are actually taking on liability by participating in the various projects and entering into these project agreements that otherwise they wouldn't have. Is that responsive to the liability question?
Yeah, I mean, that is, and really I just wanted to run by you that you're sufficiently comfortable with a contractual clause in an agreement versus creating an entity that is a subset of the whole.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that to the extent that you're suggesting that there's an alternative to this this structure, where rather than the JPA structure, there was simply a the various entities doing like a joint RFO and then doing some sort of joint project agreement.
Or creating an entity so the developer deals with a single entity. I mean, that's a strong.
Rick,
yeah,
I'm sorry to interrupt. The motion is to table this, and so I mean we're talking about whether we're going to. I mean, my point is, if you're in support of tabling the motion, these are questions that probably should be debated more thoroughly offline. And so if we do agree that we're going to table it, I think maybe we should then come up with times that people could either individually or in a smaller group. I mean, I guess I don't want to hash all of this out right now unless people think they want to approve the whole thing tonight, and it doesn't sound like we do. So,
Jeff, I want to speak to that too. I mean, I think there's probably a consensus that an alliance of CCAs for doing things like joint procurement makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
But there are a lot of questions amongst, and both Ricks have raised questions about how it really works in practice. And I think one underlying theme is, to what degree does PCE retain its, autonomy? And I think it really we would be well served if we scheduled the meeting and had all the smart people in the room and just whiteboarded out some of this. And if there were less than the majority of participants, because a lot of board members may not feel the need to get into this level of detail. But clearly some board members do, and for that reason, we definitely should go ahead. I would definitely support the motion. So
okay.
Maybe that's what we ought to do at this point.
Well, I will take other comments, but again, I think if you are generally in support of the motion, then we will come up with sort of some time and place or places to have these further discussions. I just don't want to, I feel like it's more efficient, a better use of our time to, if we're going to table it, we table it, and then we come up with times that people can ask these more detailed questions separately. That's my 2 cents, but I will hear other comments on the motion on the table, and then we can figure out a process going forward. Julia's got her hand up. Go ahead, Julia.
Thank you. I am in support of the motion. I don't have a problem with waiting for a month, but I do want to speak to process. I think, for something like this, which when it came up in the executive committee meeting, it was another situation where many of us had questions, and we had to sort of do the same thing where we had to say, look, this is taking a lot of time. Let's move on. I think it just goes to show us that for something as large as this, and it does have value, but some of us want to know more. We need to have a study session. We need to get on board a little earlier. So for this to come up now, even with the month, I think it's a good point. I'm not exactly sure how we're going to wedge some of that in. And to talk about it offline is fine, but I think there's enough of us who are interested that it would have been a better situation, especially given how much work staff and council and everyone else has put into this to have a study session or updates or something earlier. And so I'd like to please, ask that be something that we consider when it's not just a straightforward procurement, when it's something big like this, let's have a chance to hash it out because it does feel a little rushed, and even a month, I'm not exactly sure what's going to be happening in that month. And then I'd also just like to make the comment that if we can't actually make changes, then I'm not sure the value of hashing some of these things out. If what David and others have said is the case in which we can't actually make any changes to this, then what would be the value, or would we go ahead and ask for changes that the CCAs could say is no, this is already a done deal. So anyway, I just didn't know if there was any flexibility and if it was worth everyone trying to move things around to make this happen if we really can't make changes to the JPA agreement anyway.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna, Laura, forgive me. I'm gonna let Ilana speak just in case. I think she might have had a comment in that direction. So Ilana, why don't you go next and I'll come back to Laura, Ann, and Dave.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify because there have been a couple questions about the fact that San Francisco and San Jose had kind of special provisions. The reason for those, and Tony, you can correct me if I misspeak here, but is that those are individual cities that are acting as CCAs rather than JPA CCAs. So they have some very specific rules that they need to follow regarding city budget. Those are really administrative requirements for those individual entities rather than additions based on their policy, based on specific policies relevant to those individual CCAs. So I just wanted to clarify the reason for those kind of special provisions. And, in terms of ability to make further changes, Tony, I'll defer to you on that. My understanding is, at this point, the JPA agreement itself, which, as David mentioned, is really just the formation document, is final in terms of substance. That what is not yet set in stone is all of these, the future kind of how the structure is going to work moving forward and how the individual projects are going to go and the agreements for those projects. So I do think there's been a lot of thinking around that, but that's very much not yet set in stone. It's just this formation agreement that my understanding is at this point it's pretty set in terms of substance. So I just wanted to clarify that point for everyone.
And Ilana, just to follow up on that, I mean, part of the reason that one of the goals of the JPA formation document is to provide that flexibility for the subsequent steps. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, that exactly. The intent was to make it as kind of bare bones as possible. Really making sure that we checked all the boxes of what the government code requires, and but that the more kind of meaty negotiating would become more relevant later on as individual members entered the projects.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay, Laura is up next. Go ahead, Laura.
Thank you. So just to add my perspective to this, I'm in favor of the idea of, maximizing our purchasing power. I think that makes a lot of sense. A lot of the conversation, it seems that we've had at this discussion, as well as the last one, really seemed to me kind of the underlying tension that we have here is that our need to attain our 2025 objectives and, making sure that we serve our customer base. And to the extent to which, I think Julia brings up some good points about, and has been echoed before, which is around this time crunch that we have and the complexity associated with this. Perhaps there's, it's a parallel path that we take, right? One is trying to make sure that there's a greater understanding of what this is and what is our locus of control as we move forward in this agreement. And then how does that compare to our values as an organization and what we stand for, right? And what I mean by that is, what is our criteria for how we're going to conduct business and how we're going to go about supporting our community. So, perhaps it ends up being, two separate conversations, but I think that's really what I'm hearing is the key issue is what are our underlying values about how we're going to operate as an entity in service to our constituents. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anne, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I support the motion. I liked what Julia said about a study session. I have, if it goes forward that way, or if it's some other type of meeting, I have a set of questions that basically ask about the personalities of these other CCAs, just so that I would feel more comfortable knowing how in line they are with us or how different they are from us. I would assume that most CCAs have a lot of shared commonality. I would just like to know it for how the other 9 or how the other 8 are. So I support the motion. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ann. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe just to put a fine point or just to respond to Julia's comment. Yeah, it really isn't about negotiating the JPA agreement. I think it's really about understanding how this will work, with all the subsequent phases that Rick DeGoya, kind of walked us through. And that's where the real action is. And I think that's where there's some need to understand how PCE would assert itself in those various phases. Like, for example, next time an RFO goes out, would we be able to insert our labor policy in that RFO as in some form or fashion? So again, I don't think it's so much about I don't think we're worried about the JPA. It's really everything that comes afterwards.
It is.
Yeah. Larry, go ahead.
Thanks, Jeff. I too am in support of Rick's motion tonight. And I also feel that the JPA is an appropriate vehicle for us to go forward, but I share some of the concerns that have been expressed tonight. My concern is, unfortunately, my background, I like to see all of the questions and answers in written format. And I'm wondering if there's a way what's been discussed tonight can be synthesized by Alana and David and somehow sent to all the board members or some of the board members so we can take a look at it and help go through all of the issues. I deal better when I can see things in writing or when presented in a study session. And I know we have Brown Act issues we need to be careful of, but I really do need to be educated a little bit more on all of the process, and some great questions have been brought to the front tonight. I'd like to see them addressed sooner rather than later.
Okay, thank you, Larry. That's a good segue. So I'm going to just make a suggestion here, and I'm assuming that the motion on the table will pass and that we will be tabling this until January. I think Larry, what you're describing is sort of an FAQ, starting with the questions and answers from tonight that we could start adding to. And I mean, there's a couple of ways we could do this. We could just do everything kind of through email. People could email their questions or have phone calls as needed with council or Jan or staff. And then we could just synthesize questions and answers and have sort of a long kind of a report that goes out to the entire board again. Or we could schedule a separate, probably a separate study session we talked about. I feel like this is a longer discussion than I would like to squeeze. I wouldn't want to. Our executive committee meetings are going. I mean, all of our meetings are going long, and I hate to schedule another meeting, but I feel like this is it's probably worth a separate meeting if say a group of say 10 people or up to half the board wanted to just sit down and have a discussion of it. Or we could do both. I mean, or people could address their individual questions to staff, and we could get a written summary of those discussions, and then we could also have a separate study session. And I'm open to comments on sort of the wisdom of one or both of those pathways. either before or after we vote on a motion on tabling, because it does sound like there's a consensus does seem to be that we want to have some form of information gathering before we vote on this.
Jeff, if I may, this is Jan.
Yes.
I think it would be helpful if we could get everyone's questions. For example, I think Rick Bonilla said you had 2 pages or 4 pages of questions. I don't think we heard all of those. So I just want to make sure we get all of those questions. And I would like us to be able to get all those, to put written answers together for all of those. And if you would like to also have a study session, Anne can work with those interested to see if we can find a time to do that. I think we would try to get the questions and answers out before that. So if there still are areas where there's, that we can go through those in detail, and then I'm sure there will be more questions that arise. There always are. Once you get one thing answered, it's like, oh, but what about this too?
Yes.
So however you want to do it, but I would appreciate it if those of you who have questions can get those to us.
Okay, so
better, like maybe by tomorrow, so that we have time to work on it.
Okay, so let me refine what I just suggested. Let's give people till Monday or end of day Monday, just because I know it's kind of quick. It's hard to turn things around in one day like that. So anyone on the board, email your questions to Jan, along with, and with those questions, you can email sort of your desire to participate in a study session, or if you just getting the questions answered is fine for you. Jan, if you or Anne could collate those, assess the interest in the study session, and then maybe if you've got whoever's interested in the study session, maybe you could organize that group through Anne, like we do the poll or whatever. So we get collect all the questions from the board by Monday, work on answering those questions while scheduling the study session, try to have the questions asked and answered and it's redistributed to the board before the study session, so that anyone who's interested in the study session could then follow up on any questions or answers during that meeting, that separate meeting. So does that make sense?
Yeah, we can try to do that. There are a number of people who are going to be out for the next couple of weeks, so
I'm imagining that the study session would be like probably after the executive committee, like sometime mid-January, but it would be, it could be 10 days before the board meeting. I think that would be reasonable time to get people's, I mean, assuming as we are that the JPA itself is unlikely to change much, but that people's questions and people's comfort with it might be assuaged during that time.
Okay.
Okay, Larry had his hand back up. Go ahead, Larry.
No, I just wanted to clarify whether when the FAQ is, let's say, presented to the board in the next week or two, will the board be able to follow up with questions to Ilana and David for clarification, or are we starting to run afoul of Brown Act issues if we're...
You can contact council or staff directly, as long as you don't sort of discuss it in sequence with 10 other board members. Council, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I believe
you've never been righter, Jeff.
Okay, so yes, you would be welcome to pursue further discussions from the FAQ with staff, just not in sequence among board members. Yeah.
So in terms of if we have a follow-up question that clarifies something in the FAQ, will staff clarify that in an updated FAQ, or would that remain a discussion between the board member and staff?
We certainly can. I mean, I think we'd probably look at it on a case-by-case basis, but there'd be no reason why we couldn't.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, with that process in place suggested, if there are no other questions or comments, we could take a roll call vote. I'm just going to look to see if anyone has hands up. If we're ready to move on, then Anne, roll call vote, please.
Okay, then this is a roll call vote on the motion to table this item. If you would please announce your approval or disapproval of the motion when I announce your jurisdiction. County of San Mateo.
Yes.
County of San Mateo. Town of Atherton.
Yes.
City of Belmont.
Yes.
City of Brisbane.
Yes.
City of Burlingame.
Yes.
Town of Colma. City of Daly City.
Yes.
City of East Palo Alto. Carlos?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I didn't hear my city called. Forgive me.
Sorry.
Yes.
City of Foster City. Foster City? Okay, City of Half Moon Bay.
Yes.
Town of Hillsborough.
Yes.
City of Los Banos.
Yes.
City of Menlo Park.
Yes.
City of Millbrae.
Yes.
City of Pacifica.
Yes.
Town of Portola Valley.
Yes.
City of Redwood City.
Yes.
City of San Bruno.
Yes.
City of San Carlos.
Yes.
City of San Mateo.
Yes.
City of South San Francisco.
Yes.
Town of Woodside. The motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to item 6, approval of delegation of approval of the Voyager Wind project. Siobhan, are you?
Yep, I'm here. Thank you. Yep. Good evening. Thank you. Go to the next slide. We're going to give a project overview. We'll talk about the electricity generation profile of the project, how it fits in with our portfolio, and then we'll move to our recommendation. Next slide. To begin, our recommendation, this is just taken out of the board packet, is to delegate authority to execute the power purchase agreement for the Voyager Wind project. It's an 8-year agreement, and we'll get into the details on the following slides. Next, please. About a year ago now, we ran a request for proposals soliciting contracts for renewable energy projects that were 2 to 8 years in term length. This was to help meet one of the guidelines that's in our integrated resource plan, which was to target a variety of term lengths in our contracts. We wanted to get about 50% from long-term renewables, and then the other 50% from contracts that were medium term, which we said were 1 to 4 years, or intermediate term for 5 to 10 years. This is just to help diversify and manage our risk in our portfolio. Next slide, please. Coming out of that RFP, we actually did not receive that many offers, but one that we did receive was for the Voyager 2 wind project. It's about 130 megawatts located in Mojave, California, in the Tehachapi wind area. It's owned by a company called TerraGen. We're going to procure about half of the capacity. It's an existing plant. It started operating in 2018. And since it is operating, it will be able to start delivering power to us on January 1, 2021, assuming we approve the PPA tonight. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, it's an existing power plant. It's owned by a company called TerraGen Power. They're a very well-known, very experienced developer and owner of wind projects. TerraGen entered into a contract with Shell Energy North America. Shell Sina has a long-term power purchase agreement to buy the output from the plant. Our contract would be with Shell to sell a portion of that to us. Obviously, everyone knows who the Shell parent is. Shell Energy North America does a lot of work on renewable energy in North America, including 1.6 gigawatts of solar generation and 5 gigawatts of wind that's operating or in development. Next slide, please. One of the reasons that we liked this particular project is, if you can see, this is the generation profile. So each of those squares is a month during the course of the year, and that blue line represents the amount of electricity we would expect to get for an average day in that month. So starting at the top left, that's January, going down to December in the bottom right. But what we found interesting and a good fit for our portfolio in particular were months like June, July, and August, where we see a generation profile that is inverse to solar generation. And so this will help fill in some of our needs around our solar projects. Next slide, please. This is showing a average annual shape of our load. That's the gray line along the top. So each like sort of double hump is 1 year. The vertical lines underneath represent what we've contracted for that year. So the blue lines are other power purchase agreements, primarily our 2 solar projects and then some of the wind projects. And then the red shows the addition of this project into our portfolio. So you can see, especially it's helping to fill up some of the overnight times where we don't get any solar power. Next slide, please. And this is showing for one particular year, this is 2023. Each sort of double hump now is 1 month. And this is showing the average load and contracts for each month. So as we think about how to meet our goal for 2025 to be 100% renewable every hour of the year, we're trying to fill in all of the white space basically with blue lines. So again, you can see, especially in the summertime, in the middle of the chart, there's a lot more red filling in the overnight hours, which is something that we're looking for. Next slide, please. And then as everyone knows, or most people know, earlier this year, we approved our strategic plan. So we just wanted to call out how this contract is helping us to meet some of the priorities and goals of our plan. So our priority 1 was to design a power portfolio that is sourced from 100% carbon-free energy by 2025. And under the power resources section, we have goals around securing low-cost, clean sources of electricity. And then we go into some of those objectives. So just trying to align this particular contract with our plan. Next slide, please. All right, so that was our last slide. And I just want to reiterate, the recommendation is to execute the power purchase agreement. It would start on January 1, go through 2028. We would be procuring the energy, the renewable energy credits, and the resource adequacy. We get full, all of the benefits of the project would come to PCE. Are there any questions, please?
Anne's got her hand up. Anne, go ahead.
Again, having been the alternate, you might have covered this already. With the original solar or wind power companies or anyone else that we deal with, do we ask about environmental impacts and bird deaths? And with bird deaths, specifically raptor deaths, and do they have long-term plans, since this is a contract going into 2028, do they have plans to try to mitigate the death of raptors especially, but birds in general?
Yeah, so we've approached it in different ways. Since this is an existing project, it's built in a very well-developed, from a wind perspective, area, the Tehachapi area. I believe it might have even been a repower of an existing project. We did slightly less analysis because it was already built. We've also just completed an RFO for new, not yet constructed projects. And in that, we asked for a number of questions and answers around exactly those questions, including GIS files, so that we could map exactly where they're planning to put their projects and map that against very sensitive areas or areas that have been recommended not to build projects in, as well as areas that are recommended to build projects in. And we've built that into our analysis and evaluation of projects that are not yet built.
So how did they come out? And I know that it's a constant improvement with wind technology to reduce damage to the environment. So I understand that, but if they've got a plan, a long-term plan, if maybe their past hasn't been so good, but their long-term plan is to put in some modifications. And I'm very happy to hear that that PCE staff includes this, but just what was the result for this company?
Yeah, sorry, I think I was not clear. Since this was an already existing project, we didn't do the same level of diligence as what we are doing on our new projects, ones that are not yet built.
So we don't know then?
So I don't know, yeah.
Okay, all right. Glad to hear us do it. I would like to see it even if we do work on projects that are existing. We can encourage these companies to continue to mitigate for environmental detriments.
Thank you, yes.
Thank you.
No other questions. Go ahead, Siobhan.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Siobhan, it looks like maybe your connection's a little slow.
Oh, sorry, you still there?
Yeah.
Sorry, are there any other questions?
No other questions. Go ahead.
Okay, this is our last slide, and we're asking the board to take an action to approve it, please.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
That's okay.
Are there other questions? If not, then I could entertain a motion and when we could call for public comment and discussion.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second. It's Larry May.
Okay, I think Harvey just beat you, Larry. So I'm moved by Laura, seconded by Harvey Rarbach. Public comment. Is there any public comment on item 6? Okay, I don't see any. Is there any further board discussion of this item? Okay, my one thought on it was just it does in fact fit really well with the balance of our power portfolio. It's just unfortunately California wind is being hunted to extinction. So we need like 20 more of these projects to get to where we want to go. But I'm glad that we're taking this step. So thank you, staff, for pursuing this. If there are no other comments, I will take Ann, roll call vote, please.
If you would please announce your approval or disapproval when I announce your jurisdiction. County of San Mateo.
Yes.
County of San Mateo. Town of Atherton.
Yes.
City of Belmont.
Yes.
City of Brisbane.
Yes.
City of Burlingame.
Yes.
Town of Colma. City of Daly City.
Yes.
City of East Palo Alto.
Yes.
City of Foster City.
Yes.
City of Half Moon Bay.
Yes.
Town of Hillsborough.
Yes.
City of Los Banos.
Yes.
City of Menlo Park.
Yes.
City of Millbrae.
Abstain.
City of Pacifica.
Yes.
Town of Portola Valley.
Yes.
City of Redwood City.
Yes.
City of San Bruno.
Yes.
City of San Carlos.
Yes.
City of San Mateo.
Yes.
City of South San Francisco.
Yes.
Town of Woodside. The motion passes.
All right, thank you. We will move on to item 7, congestion revenue rights. Chelsea, take it away.
All right. Okay, so I'm Chelsea Keys, the Power Resources Manager, and tonight we're bringing to you a contract with Z Global Inc. For scheduling coordinator services, congestion revenue rights, portfolio management, and forecasting services. Next slide. So here's the agenda for this topic. I'll give you a brief background. I'll talk to you about PCE scheduling coordinator ID that we're looking to obtain. I'll talk about the request for proposal that we submitted. I'll explain kind of why we went forward with Z Global, and then lastly, the agreement terms. Next slide. So our recommendation is for the board to give authority to the Chief Executive Officer to execute the agreement with Z Global in an amount not to exceed $850,000 and for a term of 3 years. Next slide. So just a little bit of background. PCE supplies load in the California Independent System Operator, as all of you know, better known as CAISO. This requires support from a scheduling coordinator who operates a 24-hour trading desk. So scheduling coordinators are required a certification from CAISO to bid load and resources and manage congestion revenue rights in the CAISO market. And I did think some of you would probably appreciate just a real quick high-level overview of what CRRs are, so I can happy to do that. They're essentially financial instruments that are made available through the CAISO market, either through an auction or an allocation process. They serve to enable market participants to manage variability in congestion costs. So congestion costs meaning like the difference between two different pricing points in the market. So the way that PCE uses these CRRs is to alleviate the congestion costs between the point where we purchase our energy and the point of delivery to serve our load. So I hope that didn't confuse you, but the biggest takeaway is that CRRs are essentially an instrument used to alleviate price volatility. So going back, in 2016, the board authorized an agreement with Direct Energy to provide load SE services, CRR portfolio management, and short-term load forecasting. Our agreement with Direct expires at the end of this month. And in addition to this contract that we're seeking your execution for tonight, we're actually requesting approval to extend this contract with Direct by 1 month, just through the end of January next year. And I'll go into explaining why in the next slide. So PCE is looking to obtain a scheduling coordinator ID. So currently all of the CAISO settlements, so the financial settlements, flow through a scheduling coordinator ID that is managed by Direct Energy, who then passes the financial settlements to PCE. So Direct Energy is essentially working as the middleman right now between PCE and CAISO. So we're seeking to acquire our own SCID so that PCE will settle directly with CAISO rather than having to go through an RSC. This is a multi-step process that staff are currently working on. Our target date for implementing this new SCID is February 1st, 2021. And in order for this to be a very smooth transition, that is why we're seeking to extend the contract with Direct Energy just through the end of January 2021 so that we can transfer to the new SC and have Z Global be the provider for that on February 1st. Next slide. So just a quick recap of our strategic goal. Board, you very well know that we set a strategic plan earlier this year, making priority one.
Right now, but I need to talk to you about tomorrow night because
Rick, you're not muted.
Okay, so we set priority one to design a power portfolio that is sourced by 100% carbon-free energy by 2025 that aligns supply and consumer demand on a 24/7 basis. So as you well know, to achieve this goal, PCE will need to hire an experienced SC to help optimize its portfolio of resources to match 24/7 load demand, as well as shift energy to hours where we're going to have higher demand. So staff issued an RFP with this exact goal in mind, and with the intent that we will aggregate our load and resources under one scheduling coordinator. Next slide. So we issued an RFP in September seeking services for SC, CRR portfolio management, and forecasting. We received 9 SC, 10 CRR, and 12 forecasting proposals. Sorry. We shortlisted and held interviews with 4 SC and CRR service providers and 3 forecast providers. And we based that on these providers meeting the requirements that we set forth in our RFP protocol, the qualifications and experience that they held, We also put a big position on, did they keep PCE's goals in mind? Did they focus on that when they were delivering their presentation and in their proposal? Because that was definitely key. And then also the value that they offered for their service. Next slide. So after going through the selection process, we decided to move forward with Z Global, and they will be providing load, resource, scheduling coordinator services, CRR portfolio management, and day-ahead load forecasting services to PCE. Some of the key considerations that we considered were that they are currently very experienced SC for both load and resource scheduling in the CAISO market in particular. They currently provide the SC and CRR services for other CCAs. These other CCAs, they were highly recommended because of their knowledge of the CAISO market, their reporting analytical abilities. They've been a very reliable source of information to them, and overall they provide a very good service. And as I mentioned in the prior slide, they really recognize PCE's goals and think that that will be very key in developing bidding strategies as we go forward. Then lastly, they provided a very competitive offering, best value for the services that they offered. Next slide. So lastly, here are the agreement terms. We're seeking a 3-year term beginning February 1st through January 2024. In regards to termination, PCE can terminate the agreement for any reason with enough advance notice to transfer the responsibilities to a new SC. For compensation, this agreement will not exceed $850,000. In terms of the timing of the services, Z Global will begin scheduling PCE's load on February 1st. However, our current PPAs that require scheduling coordinator services will not transfer from our existing SC to Z Global until late September 2021, when our current SC agreement expires. We included a couple options in the agreement. The first, adding additional resources to the agreement after PCE signs new PPAs, so we'll have that ability. And then also we added the option to renew the services for an additional year near the end of the 3-year term. Next slide. So our recommendation again is for the board to approve this agreement with Z Global, a term of 3 years and not to exceed $850,000. And I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Okay, thanks, Chelsea. One question. If we do add more resources, like if we were to contract with another, like another solar plant or something, does it change the amount of this agreement, or are they just agreeing to schedule all of our load and all of our resources no matter where they're coming from?
Great question. Yeah, so we have within the contract those PPAs that we have signed today that will require SC services, but we have in the $850,000 that we're asking not to exceed already accounted for resources that we plan to sign within the next 1 to 2 years that we may include scheduling coordinator services for. Because as part of the RFP, we asked them to quote different resources, so we had an idea of what they would charge for those scheduling services.
Okay, thank you. Pradeep, go ahead.
You're muted, Pradeep. There you go.
Is it better?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's a question about the timeline. The way I understand, and please correct me if I misunderstood, that we have a contract with Boston Energy America, which goes till September of 2021.
Yes.
And this proposal that you're making will start the services with Z Global from February 2021. So what is the period between February and September where there will be 2 coordinators working for us? Or
yeah. So there's 2 different kind of types of scheduling coordinators. There's one for resources, which is what Boston is currently doing for us. They're scheduling like Ray and Mustang for us. But then we've been working with Direct Energy since 2016, who's been scheduling our load specifically. Now, there's lots of benefits to having both your load and resources scheduled under one scheduling coordinator. So the purpose of this RFP was to go out and find a scheduling coordinator to provide both. So yeah, when the Boston contract expires, then Z Global will take over both responsibilities.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Rick, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. To be able to enter in for Z Global to provide this service to us beginning February 1st, does that require CAISO approving PCE as our own scheduling coordinator?
It does. We're currently through we're almost through the process. It's more of like putting up, certain collateral for like financial with CAISO and basically filling out a bunch of forms. So it's not like a heavy lift that we're concerned about, and it's a very common practice, especially for CCAs, and CAISO actually prefers that we go about it this method, getting our own SCID rather than leaning on a scheduling coordinator in the future.
Yeah, that sounds good. I just wanted to make sure that it required that approval from CAISO that you had referred to in one of your earlier slides. And my question off of that is, and I assume as part of this motion, we're extending the direct energy contract to provide services through the end of January.
Yes.
And my question is, what risk do you see about CAISO approving it within the time frame? And should we enable you or Jan in the event that we need to extend the direct energy contract another month because CAISO doesn't approve it in the time period expected? I'd like to be able to, if you think it's necessary, give her that authority rather than having it have to come back to the board again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we're actually aiming to pretty much get everything done tomorrow, given many people will be on vacation coming up.
Yeah.
And then we have CAISO will take all our information and they'll have a little over a month to get everything completed in their systems. So they've been pretty confident that February 1st is like an appropriate timeline and we should be able to meet that. And we have like a checklist that we go through, and we're ensuring that we're meeting every requirement on that checklist. So I don't see it as like a big risk, but definitely a good question.
Okay. Are there other questions? If not, I will take a motion and then we can go with comments, public and board.
Jeff, I'll move approval.
Second.
Moved by Rick, seconded by Rick.
Jeff?
Yeah, Andy, go ahead.
Jeff, hi, this is Andy Stern. I'm not sure we missed a step in the process, but we, as Chelsea mentioned, we're pretty far down the path of the application for a scheduling coordinator ID. There's a whole bunch of forms that we've had to submit. We had to submit financial information, but we also will need to make a collateral deposit of in excess of $3 million very shortly. So, and I think I'm not sure that since it's just a deposit in advance, whether we need to get approval, but realized as Chelsea was going through her presentation that we sort of may have missed a step in the process. So I guess we just want to be upfront about it, that that's happening and needs to happen in order to keep this process moving.
Does that mean we'd have to approve? I mean, we'd either have to call a special meeting to approve, or could it wait until a January board meeting?
Well, I don't know the process. I mean, one alternative, I guess I defer to David and council, is whether the motion could be modified to include or amended to an addendum to it to make sure that as part of doing this and signing up to be our own scheduling coordinator, that staff's permitted to make all collateral requirements or whatever is necessary to affect the resolution that the board's approving.
I'll let council comment. I have a thought about that, but go ahead, David.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to say yes, but I mean, that's just not reflected by the agenda item
Yeah.
at all. I mean, not even, I mean, no, I'm sorry. I want to say yes, but I don't think so. What I'd like to try and do is explore whether or not, because it's a deposit, whether or not it's within the authority of staff to do, because it's not an actual expenditure. And if not, then, you know, as you alluded to, we would either need to call a special meeting. Theoretically, if there's going to be a study session, it could be done at the study session. Alternatively, perhaps we could figure out a way to do it by ratification. But I don't really see amending the motion. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were going to say. What is the timing of this, Andy? How soon would we have to make the deposit to make that February 1st deadline?
Chelsea?
I'd have to think about that because we just started communicating about this, yesterday? But
Okay.
I know probably before we start February 1st.
Okay.
Well, let us explore a couple. There's several alternatives. One is whether a deposit constitutes or needs board's approval, and we'll look to David for that. And we'll explore the timing and understand, you know, what needs to happen and whether we need to call a special meeting or not. We'll get back to you.
So one last question. So when did you learn of the need to deposit the $3 million?
It was very recently.
All right. No, I'm sorry. I thought it was no. It's okay. I thought it was going to be a very simple answer.
It's not quite simple. We've known that there was likely to be a deposit of $6 million for at least a week. However, we're going through a process of getting an unsecured credit with the CAISO that limits the amount of $3 million.
Yeah, okay, it's fine. I heard something that made me think that maybe there was a basis to add it to the agenda, but I don't think so. Sorry about that. Please continue.
Okay, so the options are we could determine that the deposit is not an expenditure, or we hold a special meeting, which could be very cursory, or we put this on possibly even the consent agenda for the January board meeting. And I think maybe we, assuming we approve this motion, I would leave it to staff to work with council to work out those three things and let us know as soon as possible if we need to call that special meeting. Is that the guidance you need?
Understood.
Okay. Okay, with all that in mind, if there are no other questions, wait, do we have a motion on this?
Yes.
I have a motion in a second.
It was Rick. Yeah,
I think
right.
it was the two Ricks.
Okay. Okay, the two Ricks. Sorry, that was us. And is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, is there any further board comment on the item? I actually have one more question. Have others, for Chelsea, have other CCAs gotten their SCIDs? Is this something that is this sort of a trend that's happening among all the CCAs?
Yeah, it is definitely a trend happening. And it is preferred by CAISO because they'd rather work directly with us than through a scheduling coordinator. And I do know that several CCAs have gone through this process, and some of them even through with C Global.
Interesting. Okay, great. Okay, if there are no other comments on this, then Anne, roll call vote, please.
Okay, if you would please signify your approval or disapproval when I announce your jurisdiction. County of San Mateo.
Yes.
County of San Mateo. Town of Atherton.
Yes.
City of Belmont. City of Brisbane.
Yes. City of Belmont, yes.
Oh,
sorry.
Thank you. City of Brisbane.
Yes.
City of Burlingame.
Yes.
Town of Colma. City of Daly City.
Yes.
City of East, City of East Palo Alto.
Yes.
City of Foster City.
Yes.
City of Half Moon Bay.
Yes.
Town of Hillsborough.
Yes.
City of Los Banos.
Yes.
City of Menlo Park.
Yes.
City of Millbrae.
Yes.
City of Pacifica.
Yes.
Town of Portola Valley.
Yes.
City of Redwood City.
Yes.
City of San Bruno.
Yes.
City of San Carlos.
Yes.
City of San Mateo.
Yes.
City of South San Francisco.
Yes.
Town of Woodside. The motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to item 8, electrification and EV readiness. Raphael.
Thank you, directors. In light of the hour, I'm going to move quickly through this item. Next slide. I'm here to request board approval on a contract extension with TRC Engineers, who is our lead consultant on the REACH codes for building electrification and EV readiness. And the extension will be used for developing prospective policies for existing buildings and supporting the city of Menlo Park specifically in an effort that they're undertaking in this area at this time. Next slide. And this is for $100,000 over 1 year. This falls under our existing building electrification work. As a reminder to all, the intent here is both to advance pollution reduction, global warming pollution reduction, as well as supporting healthier and lower cost buildings. Next slide. And again, as a reminder here, the existing building, the natural gas in existing buildings accounts for roughly 1/4 of the metered greenhouse gas production of San Mateo County. And to address that greenhouse gas source, we need to address ultimately all of the appliances in existing buildings. Next. So here, a quick schematic. Of course, we're dealing with space heating, moving through this diagram from left to right. Space heating, dryers, stoves, water heaters are the key elements from the standpoint of use of what's generally termed natural gas, although increasingly we are referring to as methane gas, which is a little more clear what the fuel source is. Next. The board members may recall that we have a pair of existing building programs that are in the launch phase now. An incentive program for heat pump water heaters. The board approved $2.8 million over 4 years, and this program will be launching on January 1st. We are also in the development phase for an income qualified home upgrade program. We anticipate that launching in the second quarter of next year, and in addition to some other pilot and research work not mentioned here. Next. Now, along with that, we have begun analyzing what it will take to meet our objective of comprehensive decarbonization by 2045. This is a preliminary model. We're still refining it. But what it shows in the orange line here is the natural gas appliances on the market today, and the line that we hope to meet to hit 2045. Well, this line actually shows 2048, excuse me. This particular diagram covers specifically water heaters. The vertical bars in blue and green show how many water heaters are installed in homes every year, so a little over 12,000. And initially, in moving the market, we want to take water heaters which are currently gas water heaters, that's in the blue, and begin to increase the number of electric clean heat pump water heaters in the green, and grow the green part of the annual volume until we convert all of the water heaters on the market. And the intent here is to show the steepness of the curve that we will need to meet in terms of meeting this goal. Next. And so a bit more specific data, in the San Mateo County, there are approximately 160,000 water heaters, and a conversion rate to achieve this goal roughly will need to grow at 10% per year in the initial 5 years, grow to 15% a year in subsequent 10 years, and then at least 18% thereafter. However, among the challenges, in addition to the sheer volume involved here, is that gas water heaters are less expensive today, to both the equipment and installation, and that's likely to be the case on an ongoing basis because of the additional labor that's involved in heat pump water heater installation. As a consequence, it is likely that additional policy support will be needed to achieve our goals. Next slide. Concurrently with our development of our incentive programs and this analysis work that I mentioned, the City of Menlo Park adopted, as of last year, a new climate action plan targeting comprehensive decarbonization of the city, so community-wide by 2030, which is an extremely aggressive goal. And as part of that, the city is aiming to develop additional policies around building and decarbonization and electric vehicle infrastructure. And they are looking at doing this code development over the next 12 months or so. And that would be with a full stakeholder process, technical and legal assessment, and so forth. Next slide. As part of that, they have requested some specific support. They are anticipating the need for additional technical assessment and stakeholder engagement, and have approached Peninsula Clean Energy for additional support. And we are seeing an opportunity to both support Menlo Park and use this process as a basis for developing tools and resources and models for cities wishing to adopt similar policies in subsequent years. Next slide. So the contract extension with TRC proposed here would do the following. TRC would be engaged to research existing policies and codes, financial incentives, execute cost effectiveness analysis that the City of Menlo Park may need, but would also be usable by other cities. Develop design guidelines for single family home electrification, and provide recommendations and inform the stakeholder process that Menlo Park would execute. And finally, through that process, then identify various tools and models that the county and cities in San Mateo County could utilize for adoption on an optional basis. Next slide. And so again here, the request to the board is consideration of a $100,000 contract extension for TRC to execute this work for development of local policies on existing buildings. And Director Alf, you may be on mute.
Yeah, thank you, Raphael. Are there questions from the board for Raphael on the presentation? Anne, go ahead.
Hi, sorry. Thank you, Raphael, and thank you to staff who came to the City of Millbrae when we adopted our REACH terms. And I am always really excited to hear what Menlo Park or also San Mateo and Raphael, I believe you were at our council meeting. I tried to push us in the direction of Menlo Park and San Mateo, who recently, I believe, changed their REACH codes to make them more, cover more things. And I got pushback from my council. So I love that that PCE will work with Menlo Park. When you come out and report though, if there's a way, what my fellow council members said, Millbrae is different. We can't follow what Menlo Park is saying, and I'm paraphrasing a great deal. But if the PCE staff with this could say, yes, what we're developing with Menlo Park or with San Mateo can be used in every city, it would really help me get tougher REACH codes passed in my city. So happy for this. I was a little discouraged when one council member said, well, we're not Menlo Park, we're different, we're unique. And yet in this, I think we're all the same. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Carlos, go ahead.
Yeah, Rafael, I'm in support. I'll make the motion when ready. I'm supporting the motion, but I really do think that, you know, given the age of just our housing stock in San Mateo County, we're going to have some sort of programs that actually look at swapping out, you know, main electrical services in a lot of homes. Because when you add the electrical load, I said this before, I think we should start thinking about it sooner than later. The new electrical load for EV charging, for, you know, the all electric stoves, and this heating, we're clearly exceeding the capacities of those of many homes. So I think it's something that you should start thinking about how we actually can begin to move that piece forward if we need to move as quickly as that curve shows. So.
Yes, and that's something we're absolutely taking a close look at. Certainly on the very oldest homes that have less than 100 amps, there will need to be a bump up. One of the things that our analysis is suggesting is that on homes that have 100 amps under a certain size, they may actually be able to fit everything within 100 amps when properly configured. And so that's one of the objectives of the analysis for this project, is to figure out what can be done within 100 amps, and then if it has to be bumped up, what are some of the implications of that?
Yeah,
all right,
that's a great point, Carlos. Betsy, go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to second this motion and thank staff so much for all they're doing to working with our city of Menlo Park. We have a strong council support for proceeding and momentum for a carbon-free by 2030, which is a tremendously aggressive goal. But we are looking at lots of innovative ways to do that. One of them is looking at how to configure the panels and possibly be able to, Raphael, you probably can explain it better, but essentially just is it possible to reconfigure or to configure the panel so that we don't have to do upgrades for all these homes. And this technical assistance will be a huge step and toward being able to possibly go carbon-free by 2030. So thank you.
Thank you.
It's an interesting idea too. Okay, I don't see other hands up. Carlos and Betsy, why don't you, Carlos, take it away. Carlos?
Oh, Carlos, you're muted.
There you go.
Yes, I am in support of this motion of augmenting the contract by $100,000.
You're making a motion. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, I'm making a motion. Yes.
Okay. Okay. And Betsy?
Thank you. I'm sorry. I thought Carlos had already made the motion. So yes.
Oh, I was asking you to second, as you offered. Okay. Okay. Is there any public comment on this? Okay, is there any further board comment before we vote? All right, I see none. So Anne, roll call vote, please.
Okay, if you would please announce your approval or disapproval when I announce your jurisdiction. County of San Mateo. County of San Mateo. Town of Atherton.
Yes.
City of Belmont.
Yes.
City of Brisbane.
Yes.
City of Burlingame.
Yes.
Town of Colma. City of Daly City.
Yes.
City of East Palo Alto.
Yes.
City of Foster City.
Yes.
City of Half Moon Bay.
Yes.
Town of Hillsborough.
Yes.
City of Los Banos.
Yes.
City of Menlo Park.
Yes.
City of Millbrae.
Yes.
City of Pacifica.
Yes.
Town of Portola Valley.
Yes.
City of Redwood City.
Yes.
City of San Bruno.
Yes.
City of San Carlos.
Yes.
City of San Mateo.
Yes.
City of South San Francisco.
Yes.
Town of Woodside. And the motion passes unanimously.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you,
that
George.
brings us to, thank you, Raphael. That brings us to item 9. This is endorsing, this is brought to us from the Citizens Advisory Committee. We're endorsing the efforts of the Beyond Gasoline Initiative to reduce gasoline consumption. Desiree, are you presenting this or someone else? Or Janelle?
It's Janelle, I'm presenting.
Hi, Janelle.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me here. I'm from your friendly Citizens Advisory Committee, and the committee unanimously approved bringing this to you all. It's the request that you endorse a resolution or pass a resolution endorsing something that's been created by a nonprofit called Joint Venture Silicon Valley that covers mostly San Mateo County and Santa Clara County. And the resolution doesn't require this board to actually take any sort of action. It doesn't obligate Peninsula Clean Energy to take action. It just requires that you express support for the Beyond Gasoline Initiative. Next slide, please. And I'll tell you what that is in just a second. Okay, so here's my background slide. Yes, okay, so the goal of the Beyond Gasoline Initiative is to reduce gasoline consumption in Silicon Valley, and that's San Mateo and Santa Clara counties, 50% by 2030. And we'll be achieving that by partnering with local governments and businesses on climate action plan goals, measures such as enabling employees to get to and from work without gasoline, that sort of measure or commitment to reduce gasoline consumption. And then we will be running an education campaign to really educate the broader community on why and how to cut gas consumption. And as I mentioned, this was unanimously voted by the CAC to recommend to you guys. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to point out why the goal is the goal of reducing gasoline sales 50% by 2030. So, you know, we talk a lot about electric vehicles and we use them sometimes as a proxy for cutting carbon emissions. But there is a very direct measure of carbon emissions from our vehicles, and that is gasoline consumption. So every gallon of gas, as I'm sure you guys all know, when burned, it pulls 14 pounds of oxygen from the air, and it makes a total of 20 pounds of carbon dioxide that it sends out into the atmosphere. And so while we may be increasing EV adoption, if we're not cutting gasoline consumption, we're not actually doing what the IPCC and just climate scientists say we need to do, which is actually cut burning of gasoline. So this is the US. Next slide, please. Now you would think in California with all the EVs we have that our gasoline consumption line over time would be bending fairly sharply downwards. But I think this is where this is the moment of reckoning where we see that while it hasn't gone up like it did in the US, we certainly have not bent this curve down the way we need to. So the IPCC says we need to cut fossil fuel consumption 50% by 2030. And you can see that the way that this curve is going, while we may have done a good job of keeping it from going up further, we actually are going to have to drive that down. Next slide, please. So this is the gasoline sales in Silicon Valley. And by Silicon Valley, I mean San Mateo County and Santa Clara County. And I'm sorry, I don't have one pulled out just for San Mateo County, but I can tell you that the line, in no case does the line bend down kind of the way we needed to start bending down. Next slide, please. And I'll just show you, so you may wonder, like, why haven't I seen gasoline sales data before? I wonder how much gasoline is being sold within my city limits. And the answer is that up till, the California Energy Commission requires that all gas stations report how many gallons of gas they sell each year, but it only aggregates those at the county level. So we at my nonprofit Cultura has been working to get that data at the city level, just so cities can start to understand this very, very important fossil fuel and how much of it their gas stations are dealing out each year. And so we've started to get the data. It's not perfect. I now have 2019 data in addition to this data, and you can see some of the cities from San Mateo County here. And it's not perfect data, but at least we're starting to gather it. And I'll just say that Menlo Park has adopted a climate action plan goal of cutting gasoline sales in Menlo Park 10% a year from a 2018 baseline. And so that's exactly what we need to do. We need as many cities as possible focusing on this goal of actually cutting gasoline sales. That is what it's gonna take to get to hit the climate goals that scientists say we're gonna have to hit. Next slide, please. So the recommendation from the CAC is to endorse the efforts of this new initiative, the Beyond Gasoline Initiative. I don't think I mentioned this, but Cultura is leading this initiative. We were invited by Joint Venture Silicon Valley to lead the initiative to reduce gasoline consumption in supposed to be San Mateo County. I don't think we have a Mateo County. 50% by 2030. And the board directs the PCE staff to receive a report annually from Joint Venture Silicon Valley regarding gasoline consumption in San Mateo County. I believe that's all I have. Are there questions?
I see Laura's hand up. Laura, go ahead.
Thank you, Janelle, for the presentation. I appreciate that. Very lofty goal indeed. My city manager has pointed out to me many times that we are dependent as a community on important funding from the gas tax to maintain infrastructure and roads. So can you talk a little bit about how that aspect, where those tax revenues would go with this particular initiative?
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. So a lot of people ask about that, like what happens if we don't use gasoline and we don't have the gas tax anymore? So I'll tell you, first of all, this initiative alone is not going to be single-handedly responsible for reducing gas tax revenues. Already, as we have larger and larger EV adoption rates in our area, gas tax revenues are going down. So there's several options. So gas store, our gas station owners can kind of bump up and amp up the quality of the goods they sell at their convenience stores and continue to make revenue that way. We sit on some very valuable property. So if a gas station owner wanted to sell their property to be developed into something that we're desperately needing, such as housing, that could happen. And it looks like ultimately with the broad picture of what are we going to do, like we can't keep burning gasoline if we would like to exist as humans on the planet. How are we going to get enough tax money to maintain our roads? There have been pilots for something called a road usage charge that would be based on how many miles, how much you travel as opposed to how much gasoline you buy. And EV drivers are already being fees imposed on them annually for even having an EV. Will that make up for the gas tax that the cities are receiving? 10 years is a long time, but for the climate it's not, but there's gonna be time to figure this out. Maybe you can tell me what % of your city's revenues come from your gas taxes. And is it from the gasoline itself or from the gas station selling other things as well?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not in a position to answer that question.
Okay. We have tried to find that data because, you know, you're right, it's a really good question and it's been challenging. So we've not yet found it, at least not divvied up by the gasoline versus the convenience store items. But in many cases, the convenience store items are providing some of those revenues. It's my understanding.
Yeah, I do agree. That's an interesting question going forward when we actually get to large scale replacement. Thanks, Laura. Donna's got her hand up next. Go ahead, Donna.
Thanks. I'm just sort of amplifying off Laura, which is not only is it the taxes that are going for the roads, but also the city sales taxes. And I believe you could probably find that data by either looking in the comprehensive annual financial report, possibly even in the city budgets under the revenues. We break our sales tax down by industry, so we may have a slot, and I'll be happy to check on that with our CFO and see if there's a way to do it. But you could also back those numbers out just by taking a look at the number of gallons of gas sold. And I guess the point that Laura's making is, and I will make too, is that as these taxes shift, the city, we as cities and city leaders need to think about how we're gonna A, replace them, or B, cover the costs that are associated with those taxes, like bike lanes and infrastructure work. And that needs to be fed up through the county and the state. So as funding is coming in for infrastructure and things like that, it can replace and backfill some of those taxes. It's more a bigger public policy question that I hope you guys will kind of explore and, you know, help us solve, is I think the message that we're sending here.
Definitely. Yeah. One thing we were looking at is like, how do you compare if the city had instead like a multi-unit dwelling where the gas station is now? Like, how do those taxes compare to what you get from the gasoline?
A multi-unit dwelling, after you put into it the cost of all the infrastructure that we have to hook up, hopefully it's an all-electric building, the schools and everything. Generally, multifamily residential buildings are not tax positive to a city, they're tax negative. So we actually, it's a probably higher and better use. And I think that's why you only see 5 or 6 gasoline stations in Burlingame, because the number of ours have been converted to multifamily residential or commercial. So we're losing them, which is fine. But I don't know that that number swaps right across.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I actually think it's less.
Tom has his hand up. Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you. At Los Banos, you know, most of you probably know us from going to Yosemite, because and we have a number. Sales tax is one of our biggest fund generators, and fuel is a very big generator of sales tax. And matter of fact, we just passed a measure last year to help fund our public safety and our public activities off of sales tax. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how the state is going to start addressing that change, that shift. I will also note that we are an agricultural community. And if you've followed the agricultural world, John Deere has now some very fantastic electric tractors. And you're seeing a lot of electric powered farm equipment. And it seems to be the agricultural, I guess the forward thinkers in the agricultural industry are looking that way. So it's just, you know, this is the direction we're going. And I think this funding idea of how we're going to find the new ways to fund make up for the sales tax lost in gasoline and diesel. I think this is a big issue for us financially. So I'm very pleased to hear everybody addressing all these issues. Good stuff, electric power, nice clean power, and still being able to fund our cities. And yes, housing, as we well know in Los Banos, housing is very tax negative to the city. Any housing costs a lot more to provide, and then industry and commercial provides tax revenue to cities. So because we have a very large population, commuter population, I think we have about 10,000 cars a day going over the hill to commute in normal circumstances. So these are all issues that really affect Los Manos, and I'm glad to see them being addressed here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tom.
I have a, wondering if you guys, are there other uses that would be tax positive? It sounded like you were saying commercial uses are better.
Yes. Commercial and industrial bring money into the city. Residential takes money out. Anytime you build residential, you have to provide services, both in infrastructure and in personal services to the people, whereas commercial industrial don't have those loads.
Yeah. I will just add to, I don't know if you guys are aware, but gas stations tend to be a pretty bad environmental hazard for people around them. They vent something called benzene, which the World Health Organization has said there's no safe level of it. It's been tested to stretch as far as 160 meters from the gas station. And the tanks, there's these tanks, giant underground storage tanks. They have piping. There's various places where they can leak, and gasoline can drip. It can run into the groundwater. So, there's harms of gas stations that are not really factored in terms of financial factors.
Yes, that's true. And if I may address you, the fueling stations, they have a limited life. Those underground tanks have a specific lifespan.
That's right.
And we've seen back when they put MTBE in the gasoline, some of that leaked out into our aquifer, and we had to deal with that. So yeah, there are lots of hazards there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ann Schneider, go ahead.
Hi, I would agree with the other cities, but I'll give you two other examples. Number one, in terms of housing, to me, a gas station is always going to be a brownfield development. So you might want to do your homework on brownfields, which is what you were talking about, benzenes, toluenes, other carcinogens, and other chemicals in the soil themselves, which is less attractive for residential versus commercial because you spend less time there and you don't have children there. You certainly wouldn't want to have a use with children in that environment, but just check into brownfields. We have a Chevron station right at Millbrae Avenue, right at 101, that feeds people coming into our transit-oriented development. They went for a plan improvement 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and they're putting in EV stations, but there is a state law for projects near TODs. They don't have to do as many of the environmental good things. So for example, we couldn't require them to put on solar panels on their rooftop to run the EV charging stations. So something to look into, maybe gas stations. I hadn't thought about this till tonight, but if our gas stations are putting in EV charging, especially, I get my classes confused, the really fast EV charging stations, if there was a tax to that went to the local cities, that's a way to recruit some of that lost gasoline tax and sales tax. But yeah, cities are strapped pretty thin right now, but I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks. Well, yeah, it's like, we either get off gasoline or we start the managed retreat away from the bay as the
Well, I'll give you one other thing. San Francisco Airport is probably the #1 airport on using alternative fuels. And at our December SFO roundtable, they are going full stream on trying to move the jets over to renewable biofuels. So SFO is trying to make a good movement. In fact, they've got a lion's share of the current source of material. So you might want to look at SFO too. And then there are those big gas farms for the airport in Brisbane and South San Francisco, I believe.
Okay,
yeah.
Thanks, Ann.
I may not have clarified, but this would just be gasoline consumption from retail fueling stations.
I understand, but we've got an exciting opportunity at SFO moving to green fuels.
That's wonderful. Yeah, really exciting.
Okay, thank you. Rick Bonilla, go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Okay, do we have a second?
Oh.
Do we get a second?
Second by Redwood City.
Okay, moved by Rick Bonilla, seconded by Giselle.
Oh, no, sorry.
Sorry, what?
I'm so sorry. I didn't hear what was going on, and I just said I didn't hear. I don't think did you say seconded by Janelle just now?
Giselle Hale from Redwood City.
I'm so sorry. I'm really
sorry.
sorry.
No worries.
Okay.
Okay. Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, I don't see any. Is there any further board discussion? Okay, if there's no other comments, then roll call vote, please, Ann.
Okay, if you would please announce your approval or disapproval when I announce your jurisdiction. County of San Mateo. County of San Mateo. Town of Atherton.
Yes.
City of Belmont. City of Brisbane.
Yes.
City of Burlingame.
Yes.
Town of Colma. City of Daly City.
Yes.
City of East Palo Alto.
Yes.
City of Foster City.
Yes.
City of Half Moon Bay.
Yes.
Town of Hillsborough.
Yes.
City of Los Banos.
I should have asked this as a point of order earlier, but this is reduced gasoline consumption in San Mateo County. Is it proper for Los Banos to vote on this, as we're not part of San Mateo County?
Yes.
Okay. Then just wanted to be sure. Okay. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. City of Menlo Park.
Yes.
City of Millbrae.
Yes.
City of Pacifica.
Yes.
Town of Portola Valley.
Yes.
City of Redwood City.
Yes.
City of San Bruno.
Yes.
City of San Carlos.
I'll reluctantly vote yes on this with the caveat that I think some more thought should go into kind of the other aspects of this that we discussed tonight. I fear that, this, while I'm generally aligned and, clearly supportive of moving towards clean energy, I think we need to be mindful of the other impacts of the equation. So if the organization could consider some of these concerns in their work, that would be helpful.
Absolutely.
Thank you. City of San Mateo.
Yes.
City of South San Francisco.
Yes.
Town of Woodside. And the motion passes unanimously.
Great.
And I didn't
Thank
want to
you.
be, I didn't want to be dismissive of the question. I just didn't want to interrupt the voting. I think it's a very reasonable question about whether or not Los Banos can vote, but because this is really taking a policy position for PCE, and because Los Banos is a member, it is appropriate for Los Banos to vote. But it's a very reasonable question for you to ask.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question and the clarification. All right. Thank you, Janelle.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And that brings us to item 10, member reports. Does anyone have anything they want to report to the board?
Happy holidays.
Yes, happy holidays to everyone.
Stay safe and be well.
Okay. Thank you all. And yes, we will see you in the new year.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.